Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV. It is Monday, August 10th. Hope you had a great weekend. Another week here as we dive into the really heart of August. And it's hard to believe, we started doing TechStrong TV when the COVID stuff started, the end of March, middle to end of March. And I remember thinking, this COVID stuff, well, they're saying by Memorial Day, then by July 4th. Here we are, the end of August. Really no end really in sight. And but the good news is we are, tech strong, and we are continuing to move forward. I speak to so many people in our industry. I speak to so many companies, doing DevOps and cybersecurity and cloud native and digital transformation. And, if anything, this whole thing has been an accelerant. I saw an interesting meme on LinkedIn or somewhere this past week about, hey, where would we be if this was 20 years ago and you were on like a Nokia Razr phone with, 100 megabit of bandwidth and 100 messages that you could send, no Zoom, no all of the apps that we have on our phones and computers now, we'd really be in trouble. So thank goodness for what we do here in our industries and in the tech world with, making the internet a useful tool for people to be able to survive, thrive, exist with all that we have. So don't lose sight of that. I think we shouldn't lose sight of just how important it is that our infrastructure like this is allowing us to do what we need to do, number one. And number two, we also shouldn't lose sight of how blessed we are to work in the tech industry. Because, the news last Friday was over, or maybe it was last Thursday, I don't remember, over 1 million new, another week of over 1 million new unemployment applications this past week. Jobs are not being added anywhere near to what they were lost. And that's here in the U.S. I realize that in the other parts of the industrialized world, maybe things are a little better, but we're still living under this veil of, man, we got to socially distance. We have to keep it, we have to stay vigilant until we can put this in our rearview mirror. So I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. And, we be thankful that if you're watching this, you're probably in the tech world somehow, that quite frankly, we haven't had economically the repercussions that we've seen in other industries, right? Restaurants, tourism, just about everything. I was informed today that we had ordered some hurricane windows for our house, and there was 1 or 2 windows back ordered. And I called today to find out where they were, and they told me that the factory had closed down because they had some COVID cases in the factory, and they had to close it down for a few weeks, and they don't know when the window will be ready. And think about that, right? That's a way of life if you're working in factories and meat packing plants and all of these kinds of things. So anyway, count your blessings. Keep doing what you're doing here in tech because the world depends on us. What do we have in store for you today? We have a pretty good show in store today. I was really happy to meet Kevin McGrath. Kevin is the CTO of what I call Spot.io, Spot.io. You might call it Spot. Spot was recently acquired by NetApp, and together they've created this really kind of pretty powerful cloud type of option. And Kevin's going to tell us all about it and how important, moving to cloud is and how they're helping people. Interestingly, Kevin and I come from a similar time in the .com era. We both worked for ASPs, application service providers, which was sort of cloud before there was cloud. And we had a good chat about that and a good conversation with Kevin. And then I was really happy to have a couple of folks from the Google cloud provider, GCP, join us today. One was an old friend of mine, Dr. Anton Chavakian, who's now was with Chronicles and is now with Google Cloud, as Chronicles was absorbed in there. Anton's a former Gartner analyst, really bright security guy I've known for many, many years. And he's joined by Anush Sabari. Anush is the product manager at Google, and they've recently announced a new certificate authority product they're rolling out at Google Cloud. And the premise here is, as every instance that you spin up, as every machine identity needs a certificate today, who better to do that than your cloud provider? So excellent stuff there from Anton and Anush, and we'll hear more about that. Then I'm really pumped that today we have an episode of CISO Talk. We've done one episode. It was just Matt Newfield, CISO of Unisys, and I talking. Today's episode is more, I think, what you expect to see going forward. And this was more of a panel discussion. Again, it was Matt Newfield and I who host and co-host the show. But we're joined by Mitchell Ashley, who will also be a regular guest. Mitchell, of course, CEO, co-founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And then we're joined by one and only Mike Rothman. Mike, of course, is the co-founder president of Disrupt Ops, as well as principal at Securosis, along with Rich Mogul. So it's a great conversation. It's about the human elements of cyber. And we had a great time with it. It's about 40, almost 50 minutes, but I think you're really going to enjoy it and interested in your feedback on it. So that's CISO Talk. Then we'll be going to something old, and from something old, we're going to TechStrong Con, which is our something old kind of mine, right? We keep mining TechStrong Con. And here we have Julie Gunderson of PagerDuty, whose presentation at TechStrong Con was, "You can't buy DevOps." And so right. Julie does a nice job with this, so I think you'll enjoy her presentation. Then I'll be back here with the news on what's new in the media ops neighborhoods. And then, as usual, I'll turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene has Ashish Gupta, CEO of BugCrowd, on for an interview today. That should be really good, as well as a webinar preview of what you can expect to see on our Media Ops webinars this week. Then we'll head things over to Mitch Ashley at the Analyst Corner. Mitch has some excellent commentary and video. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. Just another Monday here on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a commercial and we'll be right back. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, or at the top of the show, my first guest today is Kevin McGrath. He's the CTO at Spot, recently acquired by NetApp, so it's now called Spot by NetApp. And, unlike many mergers or acquisitions that you see, really Spot just kind of sits on top of NetApp. They were very complementary to each other. And that's how, as Kevin will tell you, this is how this acquisition came to be. They'd been partnered and, selling a combined solution, and they saw the power of it. And NetApp wanted that sort of functionality as part of their DNA. And so the deal was done. Spot is now Spot by NetApp. And, just in time for probably the biggest cloud transformation period that we're going to have. So Kevin talks to us about that, about the new offering. And we talk a little bit about our mutual time together in the ASP market. He was with a company called US Internetworking. I was with a company called Interliant, and interesting times those were. So let's now go to our interview with Kevin McGrath of Spot by NetApp.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another segment here on TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is Kevin McGrath. Kevin is the CTO of Spot, which I had always referred to as Spot.io. I don't know why, it just kind of stuck with me. But now it's actually Spot by NetApp, and there's, of course, a story around that we're going to get to. But first of all, Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Alan. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Kevin, our audience tends to be a technical audience, very well versed in DevOps, cloud native, and stuff like cyber, digital transformation. And a good chunk of them, I think, have probably heard Spot and Spot.io, but I'm sure not everyone has. So why don't we start there? Give us kind of the background on what Spot is, what you guys do, and maybe a little bit of your own background would be cool.
Sure, no problem. So we'll start with Spot. It's more interesting. Spot, the company, Amram, our founder, about 5 years ago now, realized that there was a way to run production applications for a lot less in the cloud. And it originally started with running on top of Spot instances inside AWS, and since moved to GCP and Azure. All the major clouds have this excess capacity market. And what this excess capacity market and all of the major cloud providers allow you to do is to buy compute for pennies on the dollar. So for 10 cents on the dollar, I can get the same amount of compute. The only caveat is that the cloud provider can take that compute back from me at any point in time. So knowing that this infrastructure will eventually be taken from you, hours or days, how can I run production grade applications, save 90% of the cost, and keep everything highly available? And that's where the idea of the company really came from. And figuring out how the spot markets work, figuring out how capacity pools and infrastructure work in the major clouds, and being able to get in front of these replacements and keep customers highly available on top of this moving infrastructure underneath is really how the company got its legs. And since then, we've been building on that base technology of just the most efficient way to run compute in the cloud, and been building on that with other products such as Ocean, which is our Kubernetes solution, and now with Eco, which is for reserved instances, which we can get into later. But the story of Spot really starts with, how do I run my applications as efficiently as possible? And then everything's kind of spiraled from there. I come into the picture a few years ago at Spot. Before then, I have a long career going back to the late 90s, I guess you could say, where I originally started in application service providing, which is what we called SaaS before we started calling everything SaaS.
Hey, I helped start a company called Interliant, and we were one of the first large ASPs.
There you go.
Back in the late 90s. I don't know where you were back then, Kevin, but
US Internetworking.
Sure, that was our big competitor. We were Lotus Notes, PeopleSoft. Those were the days, right? The cloud before there was
Oracle Solutions.
Yeah, a little bit of Oracle apps in there. That was cloud before there was cloud, and there was no VMware really to speak of back then, and it was a lot of fun.
We were one of the first adopters of VMware. We were one of the first people to really start pushing VMware, like in a data center to.
I remember it was USI, and we were in it. That was our stock symbol, INIT. Small world. Yeah, you want to talk about selling a dream? Oh boy.
We ran one of the first data centers that didn't have cages, right? Like it was all computers serving applications. Customers could really live in any rack within the system. It was kind of new for back then. I mean, it was.
No, it was. It was radical. Similar backgrounds. Yeah, that brought me back a bit.
Well, we could probably spend an hour on that, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Horror stories, war stories, to say the least.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those were crazy times. But so my career starts back then. USI, the tech bubble kind of ruined ASP. Like the entire ASP market kind of got ruined by the tech bubble, cut it all out. And then coming out of that, we were acquired by AT&T, worked in AT&T's hosting division for a long time. Then went over to SunGard Availability Services, where I worked for Josh Crow, who's the CTO over there. And one of my jobs at SunGard was to find new and innovative companies and, figuring out where the market was going. Built a relationship with what was called Spot Inst at the time, back then. And Amram convinced me to come over, and I've been at Spot ever since.
Excellent. Great story. Now, of course, the big news is now Spot by NetApp.
Yes.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great. The story with NetApp and Spot is actually both of us looking at each other as customers more than maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and Anthony and some other members of the NetApp team have a story that goes a little bit further back. But really, where it starts is Spot was looking at some of NetApp for its storage efficiency solutions in the cloud and how we could maybe add that to what we were doing with compute. And NetApp was taking it very serious. They were actually onboarding Spot as their compute solution for all of their internal use of how they use the clouds and part of their cloud journey. As we started working together, we realized that our products are very compatible with one another, and that the power of the products together was an even more efficient cloud, which is something at Spot that we're always trying to move forward on. And NetApp has a very, very big cloud play now with CVO, CVS, on-tap volumes. In the cloud, they can run storage more efficient than anybody. And as we were talking with each other and we kept putting these technologies together ourselves, we realized that this was a really, really great opportunity to pair all of the technology that we have between Spot and NetApp together and really move forward with a really compelling way to be as efficient as possible in the cloud, everywhere from your finance on your bill to how you reserve instances, to how you run compute, to how you do your storage. It really puts the complete picture together. And, it started getting more and more serious towards the end of last year. And then we were able to complete the acquisition just a month or so ago. And now we're running strong as a single unit, and we're starting to pair up our sales teams, and we're starting to put our technologies together. And I think it's going to be a really compelling platform for people.
Sure. What's interesting is when you initially look at the match, you say, well, there's no overlap, if you will, right, where anything is competitive, right? They provide sort of, let's call it an infrastructure, foundational kind of infrastructure, and then Spot provides that software, for lack of a better word, right? And it's the software that enables you to really use that NetApp cloud. I mean, it sounds like they got a terrific, I don't know, not a bargain. I don't want to put money in it, but they got a terrific match there of adding some terrific capability to what they had.
It really is a whole offering, and what we love about our product is, it's the old adage, batteries included but removable. Like, we don't try and stand in front of what customers do today. We try and add to what customers do. We don't try and replace how you do development or how you deploy to your cloud. We like to fit in right with what you're doing, and as we fit in with what you're doing, you can optimize compute. Now you can optimize storage. And what's nice about our technologies is that they're perfectly compatible today, and they'll be fully integrated tomorrow. Right. So today, if you're using Spot products and NetApp products, that's great. They fit together. They go together. We can build you a great solution with that. And what this is going to do, it's going to make a fully integrated platform that's going to provide more of cloud for less costs. And at the end of the day, it's going to allow your development teams to really drive application-driven development, which is, you're going to sit down, you're going to decide the applications you want to build, you're going to push them to cloud. And then Spot by NetApp is going to take care of the compute and the storage, and it's going to orchestrate all of that for you, so you don't have to worry about provisioning it and worrying about the cost for it.
Excellent. I guess I got to ask you, because it's kind of an elephant in the room these days, is you got this acquisition done in the middle of COVID, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume there were not in-person meetings to wrap this baby up, and now you've had to roll out integrations and everything else, all remote. How's that worked out?
It's been amazing, actually. The NetApp team has been great throughout the entire process, through the whole acquisition process, which was remote. It was all I'm actually sitting in my house right now with a virtual background, like most people today. And that's how most everything was done. We all picked up, I will say at Spot, we were used to working in offices in Tel Aviv and New York, DC, San Francisco, but there are bigger things at play here, and everybody's been work at home since whatever date in March it was, where pretty much everybody decided, no, we all need to go home. And everyone's been working at home, but everyone puts in the time, everyone talks, everyone gets on Zooms when needed, you make phone calls. You do miss the handshakes and going out to lunch with people and maybe hanging out for a drink or something after a work day, but we'll get back to that at some point in time. But for now, We got a really great team at NetApp, and I have to say we have really, really great employees at Spot who have just I want to say it's almost been seamless. We were in the office, now we're at home. Everyone understands the situation. We'll stay at home as long as it's needed to get out of this thing, whether it's a vaccine or we figure out a safe way to manage the virus. We'll all figure it out. But yeah, it's at home for now.
Amen. That's all I can say to that, Kevin, right? Amen. We're in the same boat. So Kevin, now that kind of the acquisition or the merger, whatever you want to call it, is in the rearview mirror, and we're moving out with sort of what's next. Where do we go from here? Where beyond the obvious of putting Spot on top of the NetApp cloud and empowering people, what's next here? Where's next? What kind of features can we expect to see going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So we always like to look at Spot and going in a few different directions. First was the cloud direction, and we attacked AWS first, and then we moved to Google and Azure, and now we're even looking for some hybrid solutions. Now that we're with NetApp, there's a really, really good opportunity to not only optimize what you're doing in the cloud, but how you're operating between your on-premise solution and your cloud solution, and how you might be moving data, spiking to the cloud, moving applications to the cloud. What we're finding is on-prem's not going away, but everybody has some sort of cloud play that they're using in their businesses now, whether it's for burst to cloud or whether it's for development or whether it's moving full-fledged production applications from the data center to the cloud. There's a full story that needs to be told there. And with NetApp, that really helps us get in there. And with containers and the way Kubernetes is going today, there's a really, really compelling way to look at how you run Kubernetes on-prem and how you run it in the cloud, and how you can move, either migrate, move, or have applications talk to each other in that aspect. Another way that we like to look at of the cloud is how do we continue to offer more simplicity for people? So with simplicity comes, we want to automate as much infrastructure as possible for you, so it's as simple as possible for you to deploy your applications. So if you're a DevOps or you're an application engineer, what you should be focused on is the business value that your business is producing. You should be focused on generating the applications, making sure they're compliant in your own way, shape, or form for your business, and then pushing that to an infrastructure that's completely maintained for you. So as we move forward with products like Ocean, which is what we call our nodeless or serverless Kubernetes solution, we want application developers and engineers to take a pod, deploy it to the cloud, and just have it run. Don't worry about memory requirements and CPU requirements and storage requirements. The application should right-size itself inside the cloud for you. One of the advantages of the cloud is how dynamic it can be. And what we find is customers who try and do it on their own, all the cloud options are almost paralyzing, and you end up making these very static choices that you did, the same static choices that you made in the data center, you're now making in the cloud, because it's hard to orchestrate the whole thing. But what we can do is we can orchestrate all those things. So if an application needs to be resized on memory, it happens automatically. If an application needs to move from one instance type to another instance type, happens automatically. If storage for a database needs to go from standard storage to some sort of provisioned IOPS, happens automatically for you. This is where we want to get to on simplicity. And then also on workloads, we want to start getting much more involved in specific workloads that are being deployed to the cloud. So whether you're running Kafka applications or big data applications or Spark applications or high performance computing, we want to be able to come to you with a specific solution on how that is best and most efficient to run in the cloud. So if you look at these kind of three different vertices that I explained to you, on the cloud vertice, we're in all the major clouds today, looking at possible clouds like Alibaba tomorrow, looking at on-prem. We're looking at making simplification, driving that as far as we possibly can. And then obviously, making things just as easy to use for organizations today as they move to the cloud.
Excellent. Sitting here and talking about Kubernetes infrastructures, and Ocean is the product from Spot. Yep. One of the things that we've seen is, you're talking about orchestrating, and really isn't what Kubernetes supposed to be an orchestrator at some point, right? And do that. But the fact of the matter is, and I don't think this is a deep dark secret, is Kubernetes is still pretty hard. right? And this is why we see so many managed Kubernetes offerings in the marketplace, because a lot of companies, they as you say, Kevin, they just want it to run. They don't want to, you know what I mean? They don't want to be belabored. Much the same. Back to the ASP. We are. What's old is new.
We're back to 20 years ago, Alex. We can go right back there.
No, in a heartbeat. I don't want to manage Lotus notes. I just want my notes to run. Right. That was our whole reason for being over there, and it's the same thing here. I don't really care that it's on Kubernetes. I know Kubernetes is the best infrastructure stack for my distribution and scalability and security, perhaps, and all of these things, but I don't want to deal with it, right? I want my cloud provider or someone else to deal with it, and so that seems like a great use case for Spot.
Yeah, and where we want to focus on specifically is there's two main areas to Kubernetes. There's your control plane, and then there's your data plane, or where your worker nodes live. The control plane, we're not as concerned with. Cloud providers and other packages out there do that fairly well. They'll run your master server. So there's like the brains to the operation. There's your 3 to 5 nodes that keep all the logic, the scheduling that it needs, different information about actually running the applications out in the world. That's getting more and more stable. There's a lot of people out there who manage that kind of like the brains of the operation very well. Where we focus is that data plane and the control plane. We want to manage the thousands of nodes that you're using to run your application. And that's where things get a little bit harder. How many different instance types do you need? How many different storage provisioning tools do you need? How many, what is the makeup of the different applications? Are you running one Kubernetes cluster and a lot of applications, or are you running one Kubernetes cluster for every application? Kubernetes is moving in a direction where it kind of started out with everyone said, well, you have one cluster and you run everything. Now we have all these micro Kubernetes clusters. So we want to be able to support applications at any scale on any type of Kubernetes cluster. And we want you to be able to label your applications intelligently and say, this application needs performance storage. This application needs a certain type of CPU. This application needs a certain type of network. We'll go to the cloud provider, and based on prices in the excess capacity market, based on reservations that you've already, or EDP deals that you've already made with the cloud provider, or on instance types just in general from the on-demand market, we're going to make all those decisions for you. We're going to put together how much memory, how much CPU, how much storage your applications need, and we're going to make sure that it stays running, right? That's our main thing. If you have Kubernetes, you're not going to have an unscheduled pod with Ocean. Ocean's going to make sure that pod gets scheduled on the most efficient compute and storage that exists in the cloud provider that you're using. And that's what we want to drive home, is that it is complicated. I mean, Kubernetes is great, and it's opened a lot of doors to make applications more portable and faster release times to production than maybe any technology before, because it started with the developer. It started with the developer in mind. How do I get this small package and get it out? Whereas OpenStack kind of started with the infrastructure first and tried to work its way up to the application. I think that's why you see the big difference between the two. Yeah. And we want to just kind of finish that vision, right? Finish the vision of deploy your application, have it run. And then since it's on Kubernetes, you have the option of running it, small cluster, big cluster, one cloud, another cloud. We can help you out wherever you are.
Fantastic. Kevin, we're almost out of time. One issue I want to make sure we hammer home here is, while Spot running on NetApp is sort of an optimized environment for people to use, Spot is still available to run on your cloud of choice, your platform of choice.
Yeah, nothing changes about Spot. NetApp's been very, very, very explicit about this, is that we are still running as the same organization that we were before. This is really a better together. Of course, we're going to start integrating some of the great features that NetApp has, but our roadmap, our product set, the clouds that we work with today, our vision remains our vision, and we keep operating as Spot.io, as you said before. We keep operating in that same spirit today. We just have the power of NetApp behind us now, which just helps us move faster.
Absolutely. All right. Kevin, we're out of time. I want to, first of all, congratulations on the NetApp merger, and best of luck moving forward. It's always good to see another ASP alum out there.
Yeah, I know. There's not. I feel like there's a lot of us, but we don't run into each other very often.
Not very often. Not very often. Actually, my chief revenue officer here worked with me at Interliant.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
well,
he has.
We can all
he
get
has
together
horror
again
stories.
sometimes. We can get some beers and have
And talk about what it was like selling. Yeah.
Selling. Oh, he still has nightmares of trying to sell stuff that didn't really exist at the time. But anyway, best of luck with Spot and NetApp. Come back and visit us soon. Give us the update and good luck.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be on. Thank you.
All right. Kevin McGrath, CTO for Spot by NetApp here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
So I first met Dr. Anton Shavakian, probably, I'm going to guess, 12 to 15 years ago. He was already a PhD and working for a few security vendors, always a very bright, personable guy. Anton then went on to Gartner. And then from Gartner, he was recruited into Google Chronicle of GCP, and turns out it was a certificate authority that allowed you to have PKI kind of certificates issued and managed right in your Google Cloud. And in this conversation with Dr. Anton and Anush Sabari, who's the product manager for this at Google Cloud, they explained to us why it just makes such perfect sense that as you're issuing certificates for your cloud, all the instances in your cloud infrastructure, all the identities, machine identities and so forth that need certificates, why it makes sense to work with your cloud provider for that. It sounds like the product is in beta, I should mention, but it is an open beta to everyone. They expect, this is not going to be a 5-year beta. They expect it to be in GA by October, I think. But let's now go to our conversation with Anton Shavakian and Anush Sabari of Google Cloud on their new certificate authority offering.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment of TechStrong TV. Really happy to have some folks from the Google Cloud team join us today regarding a new product launch that came out of the Google Cloud team around security. Let me introduce you to our two guests first, and we're going to jump in. First, we have Anush Sabari. Is that good, Anush? Yes? Hi and welcome. Joining Anush and I is one of my old friends from the cybersecurity world. He's not old, but he's a friend for a long time. Dr. Anton Shavakian. Anton, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well as always. Yeah.
Okay. So guys, I'm going to let you each introduce yourselves, your background, your present position with the GCP team. Anush, why don't you go first?
Sure thing. I'm the product manager with Google Cloud Security team. I manage everything PKI and certificates in Google Cloud. And I've been in this game before joining Google, so PKI has been part of my professional career. I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Fantastic. Anton, how about you?
Perfect. Well, so I've arrived at Google Cloud by means of acquisition by Chronicle last year. And as of today, I am involved with a decent slice of initiatives at Google Cloud Security, including some data security, product marketing efforts, around, well, the new product like certificates, as well as some old products we had like DLP and encryption. So I'm kind of going back to my roots, data security being one of them, and helping out Google Cloud to become a real security vendor.
What's old is new. So guys, big announcement this week coming out of Google Cloud Security. Who wants to start us off by kind of laying it out, and we'll jump in from there?
I can maybe, yeah, sure thing. I can give you a quick introduction of what this product is about. I think it would be useful to start giving you a background of certificates and PKI and how they come about and how things have changed in the modern area where apps are going to be modernized. When you look at the certificate use cases back in the day, they were used to do things like identifying the user on the internet or connect to a Wi-Fi endpoint from your laptop. And they were great, and there were many mature products in the space that addresses those concerns. When it comes to modern DevOps, what we notice is that there is a change and shift in how certificates are used to express identity. For example, if you have a microservice-based application that needs to create a kind of a mesh between the microservices, and you want to secure these connections, certificates are a natural choice. But then the pattern by which the certificates are acquired and used are quite different from how machines and user certificates were used in the past. Mainly around the frequency by which the certificates are issued, and also the availability requirement that these certs have to be there for you. For example, in the past, it was a machine would get a certificate valid for a whole year, right? So you have 100,000 machine in your environment, that's 100,000 certificates. In the new world, in a DevOps environment, you may have microservices that need certificates every 6 hours. And these microservices would kind of start joining your mesh depending on the incoming load. And the scale and availability is not as predictable as your machine identity. And so what that's kind of renders is that the existing CA solution in the market fell short of providing enough solution for a cloud-native application. And of course, not only is the scale is the issue, but also these solutions were developed in the time where the modern API interface for cloud-native application were not present. So they don't naturally chime in with the existing application model. So from a developer perspective, they find it very hard to integrate with an existing CA, even if they get the availability and the scalability right. And lastly, as any security team, they want to make sure that there is visibility of like, where are my certificates? And as you start seeing these kind of modern scenarios, the PKI team is very nervous because what happens is in reality, these DevOps team figure they cannot rely on the existing PKIs. They go build their own thing, and the PKI team lose control, and they don't know where the certs are. So there's a kind of a mixture of problems that we saw, kind of motivated us to chime in and start building a scalable, available service that basically its job is to issue private certificates. And obviously, being like any other cloud service, the focus is on it being available in different regions with high availability, and also is built on top of the top-grade security, which we believe that will allow DevOps to get what they need, but help PKI team to feel safe and secure that they have control, right? And it kind of addresses my PKI is not ready for my DevOps team, but now I have a way to address that, and still I have control over this. And I think that's what the core part of this product is about, is to give control to customer about their PKI and still solve the scalability and availability problem that existing CAs and certificate authority can now solve. That's my point of view. Anton, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I kind of want to briefly touch on a broader story because I feel like this type of a connection of more classic security thinking and approaches with more modern IT is really kind of a bit of a thread, not a thread, but like a bit of a thread through what I'm seeing in the industry. You have situations where something was built perfectly for the data center world, evolved, improved, became better, became a market leader, and then it was thrust into the containers, microservices, DevOps environment, and the result was kind of embarrassing for the tool. It was a good tool, whatever it was doing, but it wasn't a fit for the modern world. So to me, this is kind of a big deal, actually, because to me, this is not only about, oh yeah, you have a choice of where to get your private certs. No, because in reality, you need to have a choice that fits with the operating model with your technology and with how you do things. And if you are being given something that was born in the 1990s and you're trying to adapt it to the 2020s world, it's just going to create a lot of friction and, frankly, a lot of time wasted and ultimately a lot of security problems even. Because to me, I've seen that in many other areas. Back in my Gartner days, I've seen it in vulnerability assessment, I've seen it in monitoring, I've seen it in logging, where the approaches that evolved perfectly reasonably, kind of in a Darwinian fashion in the classic IT world, were thrown in the cloud, were thrown in DevOps, and they just didn't work out. And not because they're wrong, not because they're broken, not because they're bad. They were excellent tools for their own world, but the world has changed. And to me, I've seen enough organizations that sort of understand that, and there's some organizations that basically don't. They want to operate as if cloud is a data center. And as they sometimes say, well, we're not going to have a good time, ultimately. Because many of those who are trying to replicate on-premise operational practices to the cloud ultimately end up with kind of most of the cloud challenges and only third of the cloud benefits. In essence, like agility, for example, would be sacrificed most likely if they're in this domain. Certificate solution is not built for the cloud speeds. Yeah, they would achieve on-prem speeds in the cloud. So, and that would really be what they wanted. So to me, this is the fact that you have to build things from scratch for the cloud, for the DevOps, for the agile world of today is kind of a no-brainer. But I also see organizations that sort of refuse to see that. And they say, hey, we're going to just use the proven tool. And up to a point, it works. And then it doesn't anymore.
That's true. And if I may add to that, you're absolutely right, Anton. If I may add to that, one of the other things that we've seen for customers that do not have the PKI expertise, right? So these are cloud-native customers that were not exposed on how do I set up a PKI and CA. Eventually, they have to think about certificates. And the problem they run into is that we don't have that horsepower in-house to go build a PKI, right? Because building PKI is hard. You need to secure a physical location.
But it's an esoteric field. I mean, we both agree that it's an esoteric field.
Exactly.
It is. But I'm sorry. No. It's your. Yeah, I apologize. Go ahead.
Sure thing. I was just going to finish one thing, and I think there's a little bit of delay here, so I'll be cognizant of that. I think the thing we notice is that these cloud-native customers, they're really scared of thinking about setting up a PKI just for the complexity of buying the right hardware, securing the physical location, setting up the right admin policy and audit policy, getting the compliance out of the door. It's just a huge burden on them. And they much rather a trusted provider to do that on their behalf, and they focus on the core business, which they're good at, and just offload this high time-consuming, non-scalable tasks to cloud. Because if you think about it, the capex to set up a PKI is high, right? These hardwares are expensive, and the licensing is expensive. And if you have a very small amount of certificate needs, you're spending a lot of investment for a thing that doesn't scale to your use case. So they much rather that somebody else do it at scale, and they just benefit from this for the special use case. So they pay as you go, rather than like I have to do a whole bunch of capex. So I think to summarize what Anton said is, the old technology didn't quite chime in with the new modern interface. And the second use case is customers who were, cloud native first and never had an on-prem problem. For them, is also getting to PKI hard. And this product tries to address both things.
If I may offer a quick, sorry, Alan, go ahead. Yeah, I want to have a.
I got to get a word in here, guys. So
I agree with both of what you're saying, but I think there's also an issue of scale here that I think our audience needs to appreciate. A lot of people, when they think of PKI and certificates, they think of digital identities of a person, right? And then we hear a lot about the IoT world and not to get Carl Sagan on us, but the billions and billions of devices, right, that are in the IoT world that are going to need a cert. But we forget about machine identity certs. And it was one thing in the 90s or the early 2000s when we lived in data centers, and a machine was something you could wrap your hands around. It was rack mountable, right?
Hug the server. Hug the server, right?
I can hug the server, and I put one certificate on that server. That certificate goes to that server. It's a very different abstract when we're talking about first spinning up instances in the cloud, right? And then secondly, spinning up Kubernetes and containers that are distributed, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud across the world by the hundreds and thousands, and with the mesh and how the, how APIs and stuff are coming into this mesh. For those, to your point, no one wants to set up their own PKI. I would say only the largest of organizations want to be bothered setting up their own PKI. That's it may be critical to their security, but it's not core to their expertise, to their business, right?
Yeah, but the second point I almost made, if I may interrupt, was about the skills. Like you mentioned PKI and setting it up, but if you were a bank 20 years ago where you have to do it, you may have a PKI team. But the problem is that in many cases, people with absolutely no expertise are being asked to do that. Like Anush kind of makes this point about developers doing this. And it's like, it's one thing to say it's hard for a security team without PKI talent to do it. But imagine how hard is it for a development team without security expertise of any kind.
PKI.
So this to me is like a major
argument.
argument.
To do it, right?
No one's going to do that. This is a classic outsourced need, right? But the thing about it is, it has to be almost automatic. It has to be chimp simple, as we say, right? So if I'm working with a cloud provider, to me anyway, right? I don't work for Google Cloud. You guys do. But if I'm working with as a cloud provider as a provider, this is a classic of, this is your problem. I want you to handle this for me. I don't want to have to deal with this. This should be, as I'm spinning up my infrastructure with you, certificates go hand in glove with it now. I need you to do it. And so my question almost is, why did it take this long, right? I mean, this should be...
That's an Anush question. This is not an Anton question.
Okay. Well, it's a hypothetical question, but I mean,
Absolutely.
But it just makes so much sense, no?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. I think from our perspective, when we think about certificates, it is an infrastructure play, right? Like you need to have the secure infrastructure and you need certificates for it. And from a customer perspective, it should just happen as a second nature without thinking about this.
Yeah.
And actually, we've done in the past, right? Like when you look at our Kubernetes, we look at our Istio or ASM, we have actually done this in a way that the customer was not aware of it. And we just took care of it for them. What we noticed is that a couple of things is that one, customers bring their own application and try to basically leverage the same capability for their own application. So now we start seeing needs for certificates that are not technically coming from our own infrastructure play, but rather for a customer to acquire the certificates. And so it became clear that doing things in the background without exposing to the customer is not going to solve that problem. And this is where we start thinking about, okay, maybe we should package this and expose it as a standalone service for a customer. They can use it natively in their application. That's number one. Number two, the other thing that we notice is that when it comes to things like rigorous compliance using HSM and also having audit trail of who got access to what, having a distinct exposed product helps. For example, with this product, you can get full control over the key material, meaning that you can have a root CA that is running on-prem that CAs in the cloud chain up to. And this is basically making PKI team feel more comfortable as giving control to the cloud for some of the PKI needs and still then being in full control of the root of trust, right? So there are few things that this product does that the implicit CAs in the past would not address. And I think given the need that we saw, because we couldn't anticipate what other use cases people may have for these certificates in their own applications, right? So we said, why don't we just build this generic endpoint that stamps certificates and let the customers innovate on it. But we also leverage the same platform or the same product to secure our own platform in a very native way, where the customer does not have to think about oh, did my pod get a new certificate from the CA, or should I go renew it myself? We'll take care of those for you. That's our goal. But like for custom application use cases where you may want to build your own service mesh outside the ones provided by Google Cloud Platform, these are the cases where you can potentially tap into ourselves.
But you know,
Excellent.
there's one more point, which maybe Alan, I guess Alan would probably have to bring this up. Like, is this secure? Alan, can you say with an ominous voice, but is this secure?
But Dr. Anton, is this secure? I don't have an ominous voice. I'm sorry, but is it secure?
Yeah. Let me do it very quick. I think Anush has a really good answer to this, but let me very, very briefly touch on something that I've been kind of trying to explore elsewhere at Google Cloud. Kind of about, is it secure versus is this trusted? To me, a lot of things we built, frankly, most of the things, maybe all of the things we built here are actually secure. However, we know from observing whether the public trusts them or not, that some of them are trusted less and some of them are trusted more. And so we try to build more things to make things trusted more, even though we know they're secure. And I don't want to boast about, Google credentials in this area. They're well known. So to me, sometimes the challenge is this secure? Because it is secure. The challenge is, do we have good arguments, good reasons to explain to potential buyers, potential clients, their clients, that it is in fact secure? So can we prove it? Can we demonstrate it? And to me, this is kind of an exciting area, because we certainly know it's secure. We don't just think so. We have sort of built all the hardware security expertise and a bunch of other things to make things like that secure. However, how are we explaining to the outside world that it is secure? To me, this is actually almost harder for us sometimes.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, from a security perspective, the team who built this is the team who's been responsible for every CA that has been used within Google, right? And so we trust them with our own infrastructure, and we kind of bring in this as a product to the customers. And the code that we used to build this product was not something that we licensed. We built everything ground up, as I mentioned, tapping into experience we had for Google internal environments. So I think, like Anton said, I think we could have as much detailed conversation about security, how we're leveraging our cloud HSM with things like cloud audit logs, which shows you who had access to your services, and even with things like bring your own root, you can be in full control of the trust model, so you know that exactly where your certificates are used. So I think from a trust perspective, from a security perspective, there's a lot of argument we can make that this product should be there. I think when it comes to trust, this is more about what are the top concerns we see and hear from customers around the availability of CA and also who has access to my private keys, right? And basically, they want to make sure that the keys are not accessed outside the authorized users, and also the data remains in specific regions, compliant with what they're supposed to be compliant with, right? And I think that's a general approach within cloud to address those concerns. And everything we do in this product aligns with those general direction, right? Meaning that where is your data stored? Who had access to your data? And can somebody bypass the measures of the security involved in this product to go and access your data nonetheless? And these metrics that we have for all cloud, are we also adopting it within our product? So I think that's a kind of like same as our cloud HSM, right? Same as our cloud KMS. It's basically the similar approach we're taking to gain the trust.
Guys, we're running a little low on time. You know what I realized? We jumped into the subject and we dove head first, but we never set the table for our audience. What is the name of the new product? Where can they go find out more information about it? How do they get their hands on it?
We jumped into the problem and the problem solving.
I'm just passionate about this.
So am I, and Dr. Anton's always passionate, but
share with the audience, what exactly is the new product called?
The name of the product is called CA Service. And
Google Cloud CA Service.
That's correct. And
by the way, just as a funny aside, Google loves descriptive names. So you've already noticed that in the last 10 years. So we have very few fancy names like Android or Anthos, right? But we sure love descriptive names.
Right. Well, there's something to be said for descriptive names. But all right, so it's CA, and where can people go on the web to to use it, to find out more about it?
I think the best starting point is cloud.google.com/certificate-authority-service. That's our main.
Certificate-authority-service at Google Cloud.
Or cloud.
Yes, cloud.
Excellent. And we didn't talk about, like, how is the, and Anusha, I doubt Anton knows this, but Anusha, I'm sure you do. How is it priced? How is it, distributed? Stuff like that.
Absolutely. So the product is going to be in beta in September and GA shortly after that. Our pricing is not announced until GA timeframe, but we are motivated to provide a pay-as-you-go pricing, meaning that your payment is minimal when you're not using the service, so you basically pay only for what you actually use. That is the core part of our product, and you also want to make sure that we promote the best security practice with our pricing. So like promoting having dedicated PKI infrastructure for different use cases, and making sure that people do not try to save on the cost by issuing longer-lived certificates, for example, because it might cost them less. So we want to make sure that the customer feel like they're doing the right thing without having to worry about the bill. And those are the core primitives that we're using, but we'll have more information about the pricing at GA.
Sure. And it's an open beta, open to the public. It's not like a lottery or anything like that.
That's correct, yes.
Yep.
So
Anton, it's an open data which we don't charge for obvious reasons, right? So that's probably kind of a good opportunity to test
in
it, right?
today's world, they'll charge for beta even. It's crazy, but you never know. Anton, sitting at, you're a security guy. You have been for as long as I know you. And that's a long time, right? We probably know each other 15 plus years. Anton, from a security perspective, does this fit the bill for you? Is this the right product for this problem?
Well, I think we already built a pretty decent case that it is, right? I would still turn it to maybe I've been obsessed about this whole trust versus security lately, so I'll kind of turn it into this area. So can I imagine a client can I imagine an organization that would prefer to never move a certain piece of private certificate issuance to the cloud, where they would have to keep it on-prem? Can I imagine that? And of course, I can't imagine that. However, I also learned that when an enterprise says this, and they point at something, is never going to the cloud, that this means for 2 years. And this blew my mind when I've heard it, and I've seen a really decent data for it when people said, if a bank would tell us, oh, that workload, no, this workload is never going to the cloud, and this actually means 2 years. In 2 years, it will be in the cloud. So this kind of blew my mind a little bit. So that means that the evolution of how things are trusted for cloud deployments is really a very fluid, kind of a dynamic thing. It's not something like, this one, no, this one, yes, set in stone. So to me, it is absolutely the product built with high security in the back end. Absolutely. Again, if Google trusts the product built by the same team, then so would most customers, if not all customers. And I think that, do I envision some on-prem holdout? For sure. Will they be there forever? I bet they would not be. At least that's my impression. And I've dealt with this in other areas where we deal with, say, key management, encryption, secrets management. There will be companies who would say, no, it has to be hardware and it has to be on-prem.
Yeah.
And we tell them, okay, we'll build the Google Cloud Service to talk to your HSM. We'll talk to your other traditional legacy approach. And when we build it, we'll meet you where you are. But do we expect that you'd stay there? No. Frankly, things change.
It's an intermediate step.
Yeah.
At best, it's an intermediate step.
And
Yes.
I think, I mean, this sounds to me, as we were talking off camera,
The right product for the right time for the way we do things now. And then, of course, you got to keep it current for the way we'll do things tomorrow. But it starts here. You don't want to use, SSL sockets from Netscape. And so it's a good thing. Anush, I'm going to give you the last word, and then we'll end the interview.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think we're very excited about this, and the call to action is please try the product and give us feedback and where we can improve. We are very motivated to make this a kind of a highly integrated part of Google Cloud, but we also want to meet you where you are. And the long term for this, quite honestly, is a single pane CA lifecycle management, right, where you don't have to maintain multiple PKI infrastructure, and basically have ability to use one for all your needs. So we are motivated to walk that journey with you, and just need your input, and basically that's the call to action. That's all. Thank you.
fantastic.
Anush, say your last name for me. I don't want to mess it up. Saburi.
Saburi.
Yeah? Saburi.
Saburi. Yeah.
Anush Saburi, Product Manager, Google Cloud, a CA certificate, and Dr. Anton Chavakian, Security Expert at Google Cloud
Yeah,
as
my
well.
title is like Security Solutions Strategy something, so I forgot by now, but I think
So
titles
did
matter
I.
a bit less. But
Yeah, all around security, dude. Thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV. Have a great day. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest. I was really excited last week. We debuted the first episode of DevOps Unbound. And that was on Thursday's show. If you haven't seen it, you can go back to Thursday's TechStrong TV, or DevOps Unbound episode itself is available on Digital Anarchist as a standalone segment. And then it's also available as an audio-only podcast on our SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud channel. And it'll also be available within DevOps.com, I think, sometime this week. But it really represents a new leaf, a new chapter in our story here at Media Ops as we continue to evolve and do more video and more stretching the envelope. So rather than just sort of the usual interviews and stuff that we do here on TechStrong TV, this represents more of a bi-weekly series and each week or every other week is a new episode. Our next segment is our second entry, or it's actually our first because we've done one episode of this before. It's called CISO Talk, and my co-host with it is Matt Newfield, who's the CISO over at Unisys. Matt and I had done one where it was just him and I talking, and it was great. But today represents to me anyway kind of the first real CISO Talk episode where we have a full panel. It's Matt and I, and we're joined by Mitchell Ashley from Accelerated Strategies Group, and Mitchell will be joining us on many of the shows, along with Mike Rothman, our friend Mike Rothman from Disrupt Ops and Securosis. It turned out Mike and Matt knew each other from way back in the early 2000s. They worked together, so it was kind of an old home week, and we talked about the human element in cybersecurity, and we talked about a lot more, to tell you the truth. This is a great conversation. It's going to be a great show. CISO Talk. It will be on Mondays, every other Monday. Available on Digital Anarchist as well as a standalone. I think you're going to enjoy it. Here now is CISO Talk. Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel, and welcome to another episode of CISO Talk. This is kind of our first official episode with a real cast, and I couldn't think actually of a better cast of characters. I was going to say gentlemen, but let's go with characters. To join us today, let me introduce you. First of all, as my co-host, and has been here and kind of helped me germinate the idea, Matt Newfield of Unisys. So Matt, welcome. And
Thank
then
you.
Our two additional guests today are Mitchell Ashley, CEO founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, and of course, longtime collaborator of mine. And then joining us is another longtime friend. Actually, we come to find out he's a longer friend of Matthew's than he is of mine, but that just makes him old. None other than Mike Rothman, founder, one of the co-founders of Securosis, founder of DisruptOps, and general security. He used to be a lot. You're a happy security guy now. So
Gadfly is probably
a security gadfly.
Gad.
Yeah. Just hopping from flower to flower. It's kind of how I envision you, Mike. Anyway, guys, first of all, thanks and welcome. Thanks for joining us. Our topic for today's CISO Talk is the issue of humans and cybersecurity. I think, though we always try to think of humans at the core of what we're doing, for too long we've forgotten that. We've gotten, as usual, attention deficit disorder and dealing with processes and new tools and what's going on. But I think with COVID, we've had a chance to recenter our thinking around what's happening with remote workers and the human element of it. Matt, I know it's a subject that's near and dear to you, so if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to kick it off. And Mike, I know that you also, with the Securosis and DisruptOps team, have some real thoughts on this as well, and I'm looking forward to both of you. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really important topic because I think over the years, and you were joking, Mike and I have known each other for almost 20 years, which is just always hard to believe. But as cybersecurity professionals, we have a tendency to really focus on the bits and bytes of the world, right? What tools, what techniques, we've gone everything from, and Mike would remember the CTO we used to work with, like to talk about layered security and Swiss cheese, and you just have to put enough of these layers in to stop things. And we built up that mentality. You buy a lot of tools, you buy a lot of stuff. And you talk about the work from home. We also built up these walls, even with remote worker access within our own facilities. We put in tools, we put in techniques within the buildings we manage, where we had our staff. And the outliers were those people that worked from a coffee shop on an infrequent basis, or those of us who were considered road warriors and traveled. And we were the exception, not the rule. And one of the things that's happened over the past few months that really hit home for me was talking to a lot of CIOs and COOs out in the market, as I've been asked to do a lot of advising from a cyber perspective, and hearing them time and time again say, I don't understand why we're meeting. I gave my staff desktops, laptops, whatever it may be, told them I'd pay for their high-speed internet, just told them to go work from home. I love working from home because I have a home office. And you sit and you look at them and go, wow, I didn't know every one of your employees had a special home office, had high-speed internet access, had air conditioning, had anything to make working from home a good thing, like children that may have activities they have to go to, etc. And that forgetfulness has brought the human piece back to the center of our mind and thinking. You know, one of the things that happened to me right after COVID hit and we sent everybody home, I was on the phone with a coworker of mine who was in Europe, and I could barely hear him. We hadn't even done the video yet. And I was like, look, man, I need you to do me a favor and turn your radio down or whatever that is. You've got to stop it. I can't hear you. And he's like, look, I apologize. There are 5 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment in Belgium. That's my daughter practicing her harp because she's not allowed to go to school to do that anymore. And I was like, whoa, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. And it sort of hit me in the face that we have to remember there are humans involved here. And I'm going to hand it to you, Mike, because you flip it to the other side. If you start really thinking this way and you change your mentality, it also helps from a cybersecurity perspective. You know, you start asking different questions like, why are people attacking me? What is in it for them? And you can start really thinking through different ways that don't always involve, let me buy more stuff. Let me implement more stuff. You can start thinking of why are people circumnavigating the controls I put in place and how do I make people's lives easier? Mike, I know you've written a ton about this. Love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I have, Matt. And you know, I guess I'll go back to, you know, again, just because we're all old guys and we've been doing this for way too long, right?
Yeah.
I'll go back to, you know, kind of one of the oldest kind of adages that we learned when we were, you know, hardly off the truck, right? You know, kind of first getting into security. And that was, it's not about tech, right? It's a combination of people, process, and technology, right? The PPT. And the fact is, people is first. So again, we've gotten lazy because it's easier just to buy something and hope that the problem goes away. The problem doesn't go away, right? It's people, you know, kind of ultimately, we've always talked about people as the weakest link. What are the biggest attack surfaces, right? Phishing is probably still number one. What is that? That's a people problem. I've been, from the time I wrote Pragmatic CSO in 2007, right? And it was kind of controversial at the time. I talked about the need for security awareness training, right? Mm-hmm. People are like, oh, that doesn't work. Those knuckleheads, they can never do anything, right? And the fact is, well, you're right. There are some knuckleheads that you are never going to appeal to. They're the special people, right? The ones that bring in, you know, $1 million deals, or the CEO, or who have photos of the CEO, right? But they're the untouchables, we'll call it. And I can say that, right, Matt? You have like a real job, so you can say stuff like this. But they're the untouchables, right? You can't touch them. So you know what? You clean up the mess. But the fact is, if you don't do something like awareness training, you're cleaning up the mess for everybody. And the reality is, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, and to your point, it puts you at least in a defensible position. And that's the thing we talk about all the time is, you're right. It only takes one person to fail phishing, right? I mean, you look at all the breaches that have happened. Not every administrator at company A fell for that phishing attack that caused the problem. Just took one. But if you have your programs and you go back to your pragmatic papers and you have the programs in place, at least people in my position can say, I have a program. We've trained people, and we understand that the reason we say training doesn't always work is because, let's be honest, people don't change generally unless they're on the precipice of destruction. Unless it impacts them right now, their health, their money, their family, their friends, right now, people are very hard to change, and you see that in the health sector. I mean, the gyms love it. Everybody signs up for a gym in January and nobody goes in February. It's the same in our world, right?
You know, Matt, you were talking about the patterns and the characteristics of what the attacker are like, what their motivations are. I mean, we talk about that all the time in security. Rarely do we really talk about what's the patterns, what's the behaviors of end users, the people that are using devices, systems, whatever, that are being secured. Yeah, long ago, Alan and I got into security about the same time you guys met each other. And I quickly developed this belief of end users, their idea of security is convenience. That's what they're after, because they got a job to get done. They don't. We do a bad job of designing products that get in their way. Let's be honest. We have certainly in the past, and probably still do today. But you talk about training, and I'm going to disagree with you about training, but this could be an interesting conversation. But putting,
well, you haven't heard me yet.
I know we're not, but putting so much of that on the end user, I think security has to be seamless, invisible, as much as possible, so the end user is not having to make a decision. This file just was a Trojan. What do you want to do? I don't know. I want to get my email sent. Cancel. We sort of do this to ourselves in the way we design products. But my point is, we have to understand even better than the attackers, the communities that we're either creating products for or we're implementing it in our organizations. And what's their level of tolerance of how much they're going to both take this getting in the way as opposed to selling that deal, or how much do we have to educate them? And is that really realistic to expect them to do that? So, okay, go.
Let me jump in a second, because I've bit my tongue or bit my lip. You know what? My name is Alan, and I'm a reformed security person. Welcome, Alan. I used to believe what you guys believe, right? And then I kind of got DevOps religion. And when I first came into DevOps, I thought my mission was going to be to bring the good word of security to the developer world, right? And I was going to be St. Alan, preaching security to developers and ops people. Because after all, those people, they didn't care about security, and they thought we were just the people who say no, and I would never get them to give a crap about security. But a funny thing happened over the last 6 years. You know what I learned? No one raises their hand and says, I want to develop crappy code, low quality, buggy, shitty code. Insecure code. And no one, Matt, in your organization, or Mike, the people, even that CEO who might be, trading dirty pictures or whatever, none of them raise their hand and say, I want my company to be the next headline about a data breach, or I want to be a victim of phishing, right? The road to perdition is lined with the best of intentions, but people want to do the right thing. People want to do the right thing. I think it's our job as a CISO, as a tools provider and as analysts, to spread the good word, give people the chance to do the right thing, show them that path to doing the right thing, allowing a developer to hit a button to test their code when they first committed to Git, right? Or whatever, they're putting it on, allowing people to do email in a maybe more secure fashion, right? The people who are truly just, I don't give a flying you-know-what, I think, Mike, those are a lot fewer and far betweener than we maybe think consciously, especially within the security community.
I agree. And Alan, one of the things I'll bring up, which I know is very timely for you, Mitchell's kids are older, right, Matt, I'm not sure how old your kids are. But the reality is, at some point you have to rely or trust the people that you work with. And, in my case, I don't work with my kids, but I have to trust them that over the last, 17 to 19 years, almost 20 years, I've taught them a thing or two so that when they get into certain situations, they don't do the wrong thing. By the way, that had to do with 5 or 6 years of them screwing up everything, where it was just like constantly screwing stuff up and me going, okay, my younger daughter did this, did something really stupid like 2 weeks ago, right? And after she got off the punishment, my first thing was, what'd you learn? Right? Because I'm trying to reinforce all of those things. What'd you learn? Well, Dad, don't lie. Okay, that's a good one, right? That on the list.
Fine beginning, as they say in Vegas.
That's a good one, right? Don't lie. And then the second one was great. She goes, "Don't do anything stupid." And I'm like, "All right, my work's done here." Right? Now, obviously, there's a lot more work in terms of kind of what is stupid means, and all that. But again, so with our employees and a lot of the people we're responsible for, based upon our charter and our mission, right? We have to at least attempt to try to help them understand what is right, what is wrong, give them the tools to make the decisions. Because yes, Mitchell, I would love to have, systems that kind of engineer around people's stupidity, right? But Rich, my partner, Rich Mogul, has said for many years, if your security strategy is based upon people change or humans changing their behavior, it's a pretty crappy strategy. Right. And he's been right every time. And I tell that story probably 50 times a year, because that's exactly the point. We have to think about equipping people with the knowledge they need to make the decisions to do the right thing. And to Matt's point, we have to have a program in place for when they don't. But if 100% of the people are doing it 100% of the time, we've got no shot.
Yeah, and let's be honest, if you step back and think about it, let's equate this to something that everybody gets, like driving, right? We've all taken classes, you've done your driver's ed, and a lot of us have been driving a long time, but there's still signs that tell us what we should and should not be doing. There's still stoplights and stop signs and yield signs and airbags and brakes and anti-lock brakes and all of these things, because people make mistakes. I hope I'm not coming across that I don't think our employees, and I don't mean at Unisys, I just mean in general, are malicious in their intent. But you guys said something at the beginning that's true. I've got a deal to get out, and my future is predicated on getting this deal signed or getting this code out the door. And if it has not been part of my DNA to think of security and to really take that extra 10 seconds, that is a difficult thing for people to make part of their DNA. And we can train. But the bigger point, and Mike, you're saying it spot on for me, is it only takes that one, right? It takes one person who's not paying attention on a highway to plow into the back and you have an 87 car pileup. It takes one person to click the link and enter their admin credentials into a foreign website, and foreign being not part of your organization, to cause a breach. And there are no amount of techniques or tools that we can put in place to stop that 100% of the time. We've all tried, everybody's bought software. I mean, heck, if you go to the big conference in San Francisco every year, without throwing names out there, there are 1,000 vendors that say, if you buy my stuff, bad stuff won't happen. And they're all full of it. That is never, ever, ever gonna happen. And
that's Matt saying that you could still sponsor. Well, we appreciate your business.
But nothing is silver bullet, is my point. Nothing is silver bullet, right? And you can look at every major breach. Just go for the past 5 years, and you can start thinking through them in your head. Did any of them not have the major components that we would consider part of a cybersecurity tech strategy? Everything from stuff on the endpoints to your classic IDS, IDP, firewall, HIDs, all of these, they had them, and they still got breached. And it's that human element that we've got to get back to, because it's those mistakes, it's the config mistakes, it's the patch mistakes, it's the process mistakes that lead to organizational downfall. And again, for a lot of people, if all we ever talk about is you're going to impact the company, for a lot of people, that doesn't mean much to them. If you make it personal, make it about their friends, their family, and them, if you do this, you won't get a paycheck. You will be impacted. Your friends will be impacted.
That's
and again,
tough.
to put it back to human element, things start to become more impactful. I mean, even in our organization, we're sizable. We have a phishing program that we do. I test every employee multiple times a quarter through an adaptive phishing strategy. And people fail. I mean, they fail well more than I want them to, but we make it personal. If for certain failures, they get a phone call from me. Other failures get a phone call from maybe their senior leadership member. We call them the SLT here. But we make it personal, not punitive, but personal. Why are you failing these things? What can I do to make it better for you? How can I improve it so that you don't fail the test? Because if you're willing to fail a test, think about your personal life. And one of the equations we do is, you're right, your worst case scenario is you're out of a job. And maybe you don't look at this place as a career, but a job. But the same techniques we're training you on, what happens if you fall for it in your home PC, where you don't have EDR, antivirus, all of these controls that we put in, anti-ransomware, and you lose your checking account, right? You lose your retirement funds. You find out that your personal email has been compromised because you clicked something, and everybody you've ever known is starting to receive emails asking for funds, and your friends are falling for it. Again, you bring that personal touch back in, and things can, I think people can change by doing that.
So did we beat you down yet, Mitchell?
I was 6'4" at the beginning of this. No, we're all on the same team here, sort of. But no, I think what you're saying is, yes, we have to be understanding, compassionate towards people. That's ultimately, for a lot of things, where the attack is going to come to, right? Because that's often, I like to say, security attackers are like water. They'll flow to the easiest path to get to whatever they're after, right? And if it's you or it's somebody else, it's a system, whatever. I like the phishing idea of essentially what you're doing is role playing. You're giving people an opportunity to experience an attack but not know it. So it's kind of an uninformed role play. I like that. Of course, that could be done in a wall of sheep kind of black hat kind of way, or it could be done in a hey, by the way, here's what happened, and here's why we do this, and what tell the truth and don't be stupid, right? Don't do stupid things. Whatever the lessons are from that. I also wonder is there a culture in the security organizations of fear of failure? Where if we get a breach, I'm going to lose my job, right? And if I look really bad on a pen test, that's my neck. I'm out of here. As opposed to, I'm sure there's different levels of security engineers and their talents and skills and all of that kind of thing. It's about checking each other's work. So you kind of have to take that part of the compassion to that part of the organization. Do we not?
Yeah, I mean, look, transparency is a key mantra for me. And when we run tests, I'm not black hatting people and trying to bust them. If you fail the test, you get a pop-up that says you failed the test and here's why. Here are the indicators of fish that you missed. Here's what you need to do. You're going to get another test, right? And it's to build muscle memory. It's not to fire people. But there should be a healthy fear.
It's going to be a carrot and a stick, is what you're saying.
I mean, exactly, a carrot and a stick. But there should be that healthy fear. I mean, when I'm driving a car, there is a healthy fear. If I'm flying down the road, not caring that what's around the corner could be somebody I'm going to hurt, it's the same concept in my head where on a day-to-day basis, it's not a personal fear like I'm going to lose my job, but my team is going to lose their job. We are going to be hurt in industry if something really bad happens that I'm culpable for, that I haven't spotted, or I really screwed this up, or I'm negligent. Sure. You don't want to feel like you're the scapegoat to other people's problems, but I think that's key. And you said so. I love the water analogy, but if you really step back and think, there's always going to be attacks, and there's nothing we're going to do about it. I mean, and I hate these terms. Phishing, I get, but now I'm dealing with smishing, and everybody's like,
yeah, we got them too.
Someone said smishing, and I was like, you mean SMS phishing? And they're like, no, we call it smishing.
I say Gesundheit.
Bonnie, I told Bonnie she was being smished. She liked she thought it was cute. Anyway,
it's a Yiddish term, is it not?
Yeah, it was a Yiddish word. Shmishka you. But let me say something. Mike, Rich Rich Mogul isn't always right, but he's right about this. But I'm going to look at it from a different angle, but the same kind of thing Rich is saying. We can't blame humans for being humans. Whether you want to say they're smart humans or stupid humans, I'm not here to judge, but they're humans, and that's what we're talking about here is humans. And so we can't blame humans for being humans. A eureka moment for me was, I guess it was back in 2007 or 2008. It was right around, Mitchell, when I left Still Secure. You were out already. And all of a sudden, we started seeing a big thing in the industry. Mike, you were there. I remember talking to you about this. That, hey, instead of putting 100% of our efforts into prevention, we should put a lot of money into response. because we're not going to prevent everything. And you know why? Because humans are humans.
The age of prevention.
So,
right?
so
we can do the best we
ask
can.
you a question, especially to Matt. I mean, we kind of started this whole thing, oh, humans, and we've forgotten about it because of COVID. How have your planning, kind of efforts and your strategies, really changed when obviously you don't have people in the office anymore? You've got potentially more attack surface, or maybe less. I mean, I don't know, it depends on how you look at it. So what, because to me that's fascinating, right? Because it's not about, all right, we can all agree we got to do some stuff, but the reality is the stuff that we're doing necessarily has to change and it has to evolve because we're dealing with a different type of attack surface right now. So how have you kind of gone through that idea? And then I'll talk about some of the stuff that Rich and I are working on.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that we're putting out in market right now that we've implemented that I'm really excited later this summer to let people know about. But we spent a lot of our time actually splitting out the world and the roles for people who are working from home and ensuring that we had an open line of communication with them to figure out what is it they actually needed to work from home, and then built programs specific to them. The problem with that is it works really well for, we call them associates or employees. It put a huge burden on the cyber team and the IT organization because we couldn't do what you could do in the past, which is if you are in this role working in this office, you get this stuff, end of story. It now depended on what region, what was your power situation, your air conditioning situation, your remote access needs, your living situation. We have some of our employees that we talk to that live by themselves, so we see them as a much lower risk than I've got 8 people in my home, 3 of which are working at different companies, yada, yada, so on and so forth. So we've really tried to build a strategy that took a lot of that into account. And we're putting some things in people's homes right now to really segment out the house. We have a concept called COIs here, or communities of interest, with our platform, and we're working to get that all the way out to people's houses, so that when my son, who is majoring in cybersecurity and spent the last semester at home, when he decided to download,
I'm sure that ended well.
Oh yeah, that's like going into his little office. It's right outside this room. Going, look, let me be very clear. If I do what you just did again, you're not going to be majoring in cybersecurity anymore.
Matt, can I ask you about this?
We've all been there.
Now that you went through this this phase of, okay, we got to react. Let's put this in place. Let's see what people need. What do you see as the next thing? I mean, is it steady state from here now that you've got things in place? What is?
Let me hit on that one, Matt, because that kind of gets to some of the stuff that Rich and I have been talking about, right? Because we've been, for the last 10 years, we've been doing this cloud thing, right? Kind of not didn't go into the DevOps thing, but really the cloud security piece of it, and obviously that impacts DevOps. But we saw really basically 3 things that were happening, right? First, SaaS was really replacing a lot of the front office applications that organizations had, right? This was our tidal wave stuff from 5 or 6 years ago. Public cloud, or infrastructure as a service, was really replacing the data center over time, and the devices really had to stand alone because you had no idea where they were going to be from a mobility standpoint. So we're kind of there now, right, in a lot of those cases. But what ended up happening is that where a lot of folks really wanted to get to SaaS, infrastructure, public cloud, and true mobility over a period of 5 to 6 years, we got there in 2 weeks. Right? Because, we just didn't have an option to do a lot of things. So, and Rich and I were just, kind of brainstorming about it. And I kind of came up with this idea that, when this thing went down, right, it was about go fast. We went from 25, 30% of people to 95% of people, if not more. We got to go fast, right? Which means building out the infrastructure that I don't love, right, that I really wanted to architect away. And the best example of that I have is, right, folks have wanted to move towards SASE and, zero trust type, kind of inbound access. You know what? I'm building out my VPN because I got the boxes, right? And I can call my person and they'll send me more boxes, and I'll be able to support
more licenses.
Right, and more licenses. And I'll be able to, support these folks fast. Right. And then on the other side of that, there's the do it right. And the problem is go fast and do it right tend to be really difficult to do at the same time. So, I think we're at this point now where, and Matt, I think that's really talking about where a lot of the stuff that you were, now you're starting to think about those profiles of what do these folks need. Now you're starting to think about what does right look like in this new order of business, figuring we're probably not going to get back into the office for probably another year, right? Google announced it was going to be another year. They're not going to be the last to do that. So really, I think the focus now, especially relative to that human element, is how can these people be successful? But what does right look like? When I say do it right, what does that look like for your organization, knowing that you're going to be embracing SaaS, knowing that you're going to be moving a lot of your stuff to public cloud, and knowing that due to, a microscopic thing, now we're in a situation where we are mobile, whether we like it or not.
And let's be honest, you may be at 95%. So we're at 95% work from home right now. We're never going to go back to 80% work from an office. Most companies aren't going to flip all the way back to that. And if you've had these open and honest conversations, I think what a lot of people have also come to the realization is you can be just as productive at home for certain roles and regions than you are in an office, if not more productive, especially in high volume areas where, it may be a 2-hour each way commute. You think of certain high populous cities around the world, people aren't going back. We were lucky. We were already so heavily cloud and SaaS based that our move was a lot easier. Our CIO and I had been pushing this for quite a while prior, and we had our own remote access solution, so we weren't stuck on the VPN problem. But you are right, big knee jerk. And a lot of people also have a major problem in the fact that they're sitting right now, it's just a few months later, and they go, we're not in the news. I haven't heard of any problems. Everything I did must have been great. Let's move on to the next thing. And that was my point. I think what you're saying is
it's done.
You got to take a breath and go, okay, stop and turn around and look at everything you just did with a fine-tooth comb. And that's where, when I said the heavy work's on our IT organization and cyber, it's okay, we had to knee-jerk. We sent everybody home, thousands of people in 48 hours, thousands, to work from home in industry types and locations where it's never happened, ever, right? I mean, think of help desks and service desks and, back office.
Call centers.
The individuals we sent home may have been in this field for 20, 30 years, and they've never worked from home. They're not situated for that. We all have to step back, and that's just not people in our industry. Think of HR. Think of our legal teams. Think of all of these functions that have to look back and go, what do we do? Are we sure we don't have a problem? And how are we going to transition that to a long-term strategy? That's a ton of work, and really what we're focused on. It's what our boards are asking for and what we need to be able to do.
Yeah, so you know what? Look, here at MediaOps, we're a small piddling of a company, right? But Mitchell knows this because he helped me with it. When this stuff first went down, we were in what I called hair on fire mode, right? We're just going to do it. We're kind of running because there's a big bear chasing us, and I don't got to be the fastest guy here. I just got to run faster than Mike, right? And so we were in hair on fire mode, and we did that, and that lasted, was it till about June, Mitchell? And then I said, okay, guys, we're done running around like hair on fire. We've got to transition to new normal. And I think more than anything else, that's what cyber has to do. And Matt, to your point, whole organizations have to do. And we have to say, okay, maybe when we bought all the VPN licenses and boxes I'm going to buy. Because at this point, at some point, I'm going to make flower pots out of them, right? And it got me through my hair on fire mode. But what's my new normal operations mode? And then bringing this all back, right? What is the view of the humans in this new normal operations mode?
Yes,
right?
And how am I going to ensure they're efficient? How am I going to ensure they're happy and successful? And even one of the things that we've run into, how am I going to recruit? How am I going to do internships? How am I going to bring new people in?
I got an answer for you on that, but I can't tell you right now.
To that point, though, Matt, is you're talking about the folks that may not be comfortable working at home or weren't set up to do that. There's also a generation of folks entering the workforce who are scary good at learning stuff that is technical, but they aren't technical people. Mm-hmm. And so we've really got a diverse work population that we're trying to serve. And to Alan's point, it's almost like it isn't how do we achieve a steady state with what we're doing now? It's what is work going to look like in 6 or 12 or 24 months? And we don't know, but there's probably 1, 2, or 3 scenarios we can build some strategies around and say, okay, let's try to be under where one of those balls is going to be thrown and be able to adjust if we miss it. And that's,
by the way, this is not, you bet. And this actually isn't anything close to a technical discussion, right? No. This gets back to culture, right? Your organization has got to have a culture that allows people to do what they do where they need to do it under any kind of other circumstances. As we're building out Disrupt Ops, we're going to have people all over the place. So we're starting to think about these things of how does meetings look? We already have people in Asia, right? What do meetings look like when it's really difficult to get everybody on the phone at the same time, right? I'm up until 10 o'clock at night. My guys in Kansas City are 9 o'clock at night. My folks in the Philippines are it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and my guy in Singapore, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, right? That's brutal. I'm up until 10 o'clock at night doing a meeting. That's not what I want to be doing, right? But we do it for a little while until we can start to shift that culture to what do meetings look like? How do we document things? I read this white paper from a company called GitLab, Alan. I'm sure you're very familiar. And Mitchell with these guys. But basically, they're this company that has built to be remote from day one, and they've got, basically a Bible.
It's not a white paper. There's a book on it.
Yeah, it's a book, right. So I read part of the book, and
great guy.
It was fascinating to me because
yes, it is.
Everything is asynchronous in that kind of world. And by the way, when everything is asynchronous, that has a huge impact on your attack surface because you've got content out there that is perpetual, right? It's out there. It's digitized, and I'm having people consume that. How do I protect that content? Changes things, right? What systems do I get them to look at? Changes things. So when we talk about this idea of go fast versus do it right, the problem is us as security professionals, we've been in go fast for 20 years. Mm-hmm. We've been responding to shit for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Now we have to. We have to take a step back and figure out what does do it right look like? What are the cultural aspects of that? How do we partner up with the rest of, kind of the business to understand what these cultural changes are going to be? And then how do we build a program and a control set that works in that environment? Back to Mitchell's point, so we can allow humans to be humans, right? Teach them to make the right decisions, but ultimately have a backstop when they screw things up, and they will.
And to your point, you understand that culture. When you're building all this, we need to stop as technologists starting at the technical side, and we have to start at the culture side. What is it we're trying to do? Where are we trying to go? What does our footprint look like? We used to be, hey, don't get on public Wi-Fi, scary, scary, scary. And now you're like, don't get on your own Wi-Fi.
That one's hard. Yeah.
Right? Because if you think about it, I say when we first sent people home, I was like, we're sending people to the most hostile networks on the planet, and that's their home networks. Right? You get that speech of, you allowed a stranger in your house, I'm assuming they put a bunch of black boxes in there, and the only testing you did is you could surf the internet, your TV turned on, and you got a dial tone. Did you patch it? Did you change the default passwords? Do you know how to configure it? The answer is no. So now that we understand the cultural side of things, we can start building real programs, again, to help them when they make mistakes, because they're going to make them. Most of the incidents I've dealt with, either internally or helping other companies since the move from home, have been attacks that originated from home networks.
Yeah. So, Mike, you brought up I'm sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
Just briefly. You mentioned GitLab. I think part of a good thing to ask, Matt, is as people are starting to figure out new ways of working, is getting that information back. It's not just what tools are working for you, but how are you changing your work? Exposed to some companies like GitLab and others, it's really this it's interacting in real time on things like this, on Zoom or whatever, but also with digital tools that we're in the middle of editing and conversing while we're editing and working on a Google Doc or a sheet or something. It's sort of this all happening at once, but also, as you mentioned, Mike, it can also happen asynchronous. It doesn't have to happen together. It's kind of both. It's really fascinating to me. So we kind of need to become, I know, anthropologists or whatever about studying people and how are they working.
No, but it is cultural. It's cultural. Mike, to your point, I've interviewed Sid Sibrandy, the GitLab CEO, and I forget the fellow who wrote the book, but he's like their chief remote work officer or whatever. And you know, it's a fascinating study, but here's one of the lessons that they preach. And it's counterintuitive. The more open you are, the less of an attack surface at some level you have, right? But by having that open book, go ahead, have at it. It's open, right? Where's the real crown jewels of GitLab, right? Where all of this is open, and that's great, but where are the real crown jewels of GitLab? And Mike, I've spoken to the GitLab security folks about it, and I can't really discuss it on here, Mitchell. You have too. But it's almost like the more open you are, it'll set you free, right? And to a certain extent. And, you know, they're fascinating. I mean, they're 1,200 people in 1,200 offices, and they always have been, always will be. And Sid has great reasons why, and I buy into it. It took me a long time.
I'm sorry. One of the things that Mike said that I really love here is I also cannot stand the having to stay up till midnight, being up at 4 a.m. And I know if it's exhausting for me, what it must be like for everybody else. It's got to be way, way worse. Because at least in a lot of those scenarios, we're the boss. So we are the one driving that. But, you know, it goes back, you know, again, we do a lot of full circles here. It goes back to that cultural, maybe we have to change our mentality that having a live meeting is not always a requirement. If we provide the tools and the guidance that I'm going to send, what are my expectations, so that we can have meetings that span a 24-hour period to give people the freedom where I'm not feeling the need to call my team in on a Sunday because it happens to be Monday morning Australia. You can start thinking differently about how you want to manage your business. But
that's an American privilege view of things, guys. I'll tell you the honest truth.
I agree.
With Media Ops, our audience is global, so I've had a chance to really play globally for 5, 6, 7 years. Do you realize in India, there are people who take jobs on U.S. time? They sign up for it because that's where the jobs are. And they know they have to be on U.S. time. And big companies like IBM and HP and stuff and Microsoft hire them, as do small companies. It's the same thing at that call center in the Philippines that you call 9 to 5 hour time. It's not 9 to 5 in Manila or wherever that call center is. The rest of the world has been on this clock, this 24-hour clock, for a long time. Suck it up, Pansy, snowflake, or whatever the term is, right? We need to get on that. We're humans, they're humans, we're all humans.
There's a balance, right? I mean, you know, as Matt said, I mean, you have a global team, you have to talk to them at some point. You have to build the rapport. And now that we can't, you know, kind of get together in group meetings, we have to do things, and that will become uncomfortable from a time zone standpoint. My point is to re-examine the business processes and really understand what is required. Right? There are a lot of companies who are based upon these, you know, 5 or 6 meeting cadences a week. Right? I've got to meet with this guy or do daily stand-ups. Right? If my team's global, I'm not doing a daily stand-up. That's stupid. Right. So again, I think a lot of it is not, you know, coming at it with the standpoint of this is how we've always done things, but to really start to re-engineer your business. And isn't that what all business transformation is about? Right? Isn't that what we've been trying to do the whole time? And what options we have, because we don't have to manage, you know, kind of all that crap in our data center anymore, that we can get other people to do front office applications, so we don't have to spend time reprogramming our general ledger, right? So and that, you know, we can have somebody else upgrade the load balancers, so we don't have to be there in the data center in the middle of the night to not impact availability on our stuff. So again, it really is requiring a significant amount of cultural shift.
I absolutely agree. And again, I don't want to harp on it, but I have to continue to harp on it. The point again that you're saying, and that I am just in violent agreement and have been for a very long time, is that if we take into consideration the culture of our organization and the needs of our people, and we stop constantly worrying about, well, we've always done it this way, or, well, I hired them to work these crazy off-hour shifts, and we start to think about the human side, your people will be happier, they'll be more productive. And I believe, and I've seen evidence of this in our own organization, they'll be more secure. They'll feel like their company's looking out for them. We're looking out for, they'll look out for us, and they'll be more inclined to pay attention to what they're doing, because they'll feel a part of something, that culture, instead of, yeah, I'm in India and I got hired and I start my day at 2 a.m. because I have to work East Coast. I mean, it doesn't even be a non-American thing. I got West Coast friends that are used to waking up at 2:30, 3 in the morning.
That's right.
So they're working when their boss does on the East Coast, and that's asinine.
So I have a question for you guys. Digital transformation, business strategies are pivoting, shifting, accelerating. In many cases, more money getting thrown at getting stuff done to respond to the economy or whatever it is, new behaviors, contactless services. Are we going to get thrown right back into the same rat race of trying to catch up and never really get to this, what we're talking about doing? Aren't we in danger of that? It seems to me that's kind of the dilemma we're in, isn't it?
That's why we're having the conversation. That's why we're hoping to get the message out, because if people don't take the time now to do this, and now to make that change, that cultural change in their organization, then yeah, we're all going to get back in the rat race. And it won't be very long until you start having the conversation of, you know what, we're going to close a bunch of offices because we think it's going to save us money. Or, I don't believe that the tools that I was using in my office, we shoved them home. I don't see the efficiencies. I don't see the productivity. Everybody back in an office. And you can see it's almost cyclical. Not every year, but every few years you'll read some paper of some major Fortune 50 that's like, everybody in an office because, blah, blah, blah. And they look at your badge in and badge out. When did you leave for lunch? And you could fall down that rat hole if you're not careful.
Let me be very clear. Business is going to transform. Security has a choice about whether we get ahead of it and work with the teams and understand how our world has to shift, or we will be dragged along kicking and screaming. So, Mitch, your point, I mean, that cat is out of the bag. There is no going back to, you know what, I'm going to go buy Siebel. There's no Siebel to run CRM on-prem anymore. That's not an option, right? So that cat has left the bag. Nobody's going to go back and say, I think I'm going to build my own data center now. Said nobody, right? So these things are happening. Oh, hey, how about this one? This is great, right? Your audience will love this, right? Hey, let's go back and do waterfall. Right? I mean, right. No, nobody's doing that.
But you know what? There are places where waterfall still makes sense.
And actually, I had one guy at an event I did who, he was actually a hell of a lot funnier than me. But he said to me, he goes, "Hey, Mike," because I was talking about, DevOps and all this other stuff and, kind of sec DevOps and all this. And I'm, oh, how exciting it is. He goes, "Hey, Mike, you know what we call, DevOps in our shop?" I said, "What?" He said,
"Fast waterfall." That's wonderful. Yeah, to a certain degree, it's true.
Yeah,
all right, that's a great place. I gotta call a wrap here. That's a great way to end it. Okay, fast waterfall. We're supposed to go 40 minutes. I think we're 50. Imagine going long with Mike Rothman on your show. I don't think it's ever happened before.
It's happened. I think it's happened.
It's happened
twice.
Guys, though, can I tell you, this is one of the most fun, inspiring, great conversations I've had on this issue in a really, really long time. It's great to have old friends all here. And who knew Mike and Matt knew each other so long? But it's 6 degrees of separation in the cyber world. Exactly. What can I say? Yeah. Well, let's do it again. Of Shimmy, yeah. Well, Matt, you and I are on every other week. Mitchell's a regular join. Mike, you know there's always an open invitation anytime you want to come on, and whatever we're talking about, it's always great. But we're gonna wrap this one up, right? This is a great CISO talk, episode 2. We'll be back in about 2 weeks with episode 3. We'll be publicizing it a little bit here on DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, around our media ops neighborhoods. But until then, Mike Rothman, Securosis and Disrupt Ops. Thanks for being here. Mitchell Ashley, Accelerated Strategies Group. Always a pleasure, Mitchell. And Matt Newfield, our CISO in residence from Unisys. This is Alan Schimmel for Media Ops. We'll talk to you real soon. Our archive from the archives feature today goes again, as usual. We've been mining TechStrong Con. We're going to go to one that I don't think we've played before, and this is Julie Gunderson of PagerDuty, who presented on You Can't Buy DevOps, and how right she is. And, buying tools doesn't necessarily give you DevOps either. It's a great presentation from TechStrong Con, and as usual, just let you know that all the TechStrong Con, there's over 50 of them, presentations are available on TechStrong Con. Was a great virtual event. And while we're at it, let me mention a couple of other great virtual events we're producing. One is GitLab Commit coming up later this month. If you go to gitlab.com, you'll see all about it. And then in October, we have 2 of our own big conferences, virtual, that we do year after year. One is the DevOps Experience, exploring all things DevOps. And one is a CUBE virtual summit about cloud native Kubernetes containers, microservices. Great speakers. I think KK, the founder of Jenkins, formerly CTO CloudBeast, is going to headline our DevOps Experience. So if you go to DevOpsExperience.com, you can find out more about that. Anyway, here now is Julie Gunderson from PagerDuty on You Can't Buy DevOps.
Hi, everybody. I am Julie Gunderson. I'm here to talk to you about how you can't buy DevOps, but how people will definitely try to sell it to you. I am a DevOps advocate here at PagerDuty. I'm also the founder and co-organizer of DevOps Days Boise, which we're excitedly in our 5th year. I'm an organizer of DeliveryConf, and I'm also a contributor to opensource.com. So now that you know a little bit about my resume, let's go ahead and talk about why you can't buy DevOps. Systems are increasingly complex, and it drives that need for DevOps. And digital businesses today are always on and innovating, but with innovation comes challenges and expectations. And digital transformation is top of mind for most CEOs because it's an imperative for organizations to remain relevant. One of my favorite things is this graph that you see from the PagerDuty State of Digital Operations 2017 report. And it shows that when a digital app or service is unresponsive or slow, consumers will leave 81.2% of the time in under 1 minute. Furthermore, 66.8% of respondents to this survey, they said they were likely to never use an app or website again. And connected customers expect a seamless digital experience. With that, we have to understand that systems will inevitably fail, and it takes time to recover. And lots of people talk about DevOps and the way that it can help your speed and agility and reliability of your systems. So whether it's an individual contributor or an organizational shift, introducing new practices in an organization is hard. And it's essential to understand how people and organizations process change, as well as accepting that change doesn't happen overnight. It's critical to align business values and key outcomes and expectations, along with open and frequent communication to see success in the adoption of new practices. And where wide-scale organizational change often necessitates that top-down model, DevOps can really be done through the bottoms-up model. And the bottoms-up model of change involves buy-in and involvement in the decision-making process from individuals impacted from a proposed change. And by using the collective approach and starting small, it allows teams and managers and leaders to prove out success to the broader organization. Because one of the things that people oftentimes forget is that to demonstrate progress, you really also have to understand where you started and articulate the impact of the changes made and understand that those changes are going to be different for each organization. So a quick Google of the definition of DevOps brings up millions of definitions. And while there isn't one set widely accepted definition, this is one of the definitions that I really like. DevOps is a set of practices that combines software development and information technology operations, which aims to shorten the system's development lifecycle and provide continuous delivery with high software quality. So when I was starting to build this talk, it started out because I took some DevOps self-assessment. One popped up on one of my screen and I was like, oh, let's go ahead and try this. I tried to answer all of the questions as if I was the perfect organization. And with the exception of one self-assessment, the rest of the ones that I took promised that within 5 minutes or answering these 10 easy questions, I could understand where I was in my DevOps journey. And they all tried to push me towards a product or a salesperson that would make me DevOps. So just to go back to the DevOps self-assessment that I found really valuable, it can be found here at devopsassessment.net. The reason that I really liked this self-assessment was because at the end of it, it gave me a lot of open source reading and resources that helped me understand where I was in my journey. You could also take a short version or a long version, and the questions were fair and balanced and not designed to get me to buy a product. Because at the end of the day, you can't purchase a culture. You have to invest in people, processes, and tools, and you can't just buy your way into or label your way into DevOps. So with that said, where do you start? There's so many things that maybe make you DevOps, maybe make you don't. Let's talk about some of the anti-patterns, some of the things that DevOps is not. So DevOps is not just moving to the cloud. Moving to the cloud doesn't make an organization 100% DevOps. It can be part of the process though. Having a siloed team, that DevOps team that you sit away from everybody else that's off on an island, doesn't make an organization DevOps, nor does just kicking out the ops team and saying goodbye to them. Oftentimes people ask for that prescriptive checklist, and many organizations want that. But just checking a set of boxes doesn't make you DevOps because every organization is different. And it requires effort and investment in people. It's not something that you can just push a button or take an assessment and put a certificate on your website that makes you DevOps. So let's talk about really what makes DevOps. DevOps is really people over process. It's about culture. And there are many types of culture. We're going to go ahead and reference the web from Cultural Model. If you haven't already read it, I highly recommend the book Accelerate the Science of DevOps by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim, where they will go much more into depth on this. For right now, Ron Westrom, an American sociologist, defines culture within organizations as the patterned way that an organization responds to its challenges, whether they are explicit or implicit. And we can see that there are 3 types of organizational cultural models that we look at here. Pathological is a very fear-based, information is power, so it's held close model. In these models, you can see that there's low cooperation. Messengers can often face fear of being shot. Failure is punished. Failure leads to scapegoating. Then we can look at the bureaucratic model, which is alignment with departments. It's very role-oriented, very turf-oriented, process-oriented. This is your lane. This is my lane. You stay in yours. I will stay in mine. You can oftentimes see this type of culture in finance or government due to a lot of regulation. And then we move towards the right, which is that generative model. And that generative model is alignment with the mission or the outcome. Generative cultures empower people because people are encouraged to ask questions and share ideas. Think of new ways of innovating or doing things. And there's not a fear of punishment for failure. Failure is embraced as an opportunity to learn. And this very much so aligns with the 2-year research study that Google did on high-performing teams. Google found that psychological safety was the key indicator of a high-performing team, and that's, can we take risks on the team without feeling insecure or embarrassed? Dependability, can we count on each other to do high-quality work on time? Is there structure and clarity? Are goals and roles and execution plans on the team clear? Do we have meaning of work? Is it something that's personally important to each of us? And do we fundamentally believe that what we're doing matters? Do we understand the impact of work? When you see a lot of burnout in an organization, oftentimes the answers to these questions are no. That generative model is, again, based on the mission. It's shared within the organization. People understand the goals and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And when these missions are shared, individuals and teams work towards that shared common mission. You see bridging, you see collaboration, you see people sharing information and the reduction of silos. And that's very critical to how organizations respond to problems, because you're working together and innovating, and you're really putting that customer experience at top of mind. And psychological safety, it's that shared belief held by members of the team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. It's practicing empathy and empowering folks to make decisions without fear of reprisal. But it's also a culture of honesty, acknowledgement, accountability, and trust. Definitely recommended reading here is The Culture Code by Dan Coyle. It's a really great book. You'll get a lot out of it. Recently, I had the opportunity to hear Colonel Nicole Malachowski talk about her experience as the first female Thunderbird pilot. And even in the Thunderbirds, psychological safety and that trust is incredibly important, because as you can see in the second picture, in a flight where the planes have 300 feet, front, back, top, bottom, they really have to trust each other and each team member that everybody will do their role to keep the team safe. A culture that values psychological safety, trust, and respect contributes to productivity by letting employees focus on solving problems and getting their work done rather than politics and infighting. Because that politics, that infighting, it's so distracting, it's demoralizing, and it really takes people away from their overall goal. And that's just something that, again, you can't buy with a credit card. And being willing to fail and ask questions creates a learning organization. We all have this impulse to blame. What that does is it has the unintended effect of disincentivizing knowledge sharing, and it prevents innovation, because engineers will hesitate to speak up. They'll hesitate to say if there was a mistake. And when you have that, you end up having more failures. And just to talk really quickly about words that we use, I'm going to get on a soapbox really quick and talk about using words like root cause. When we hear root cause, it's awesome. Oftentimes it makes it feel like you're pointing to one person or one thing that they did. So we can use our words to create that culture of psychological safety. Just to start, instead of saying root cause, let's talk about contributing factors. Because these systems are so complex, it's oftentimes not one person's fault that something happened. If I was able to fat finger code and take down a cloud provider, is there more to that? What allowed me to be able to do that? There's so much more than the mistake that I made. And there's a lot of contributing factors to that. So let's just think about the words that we use. Also, make sure that you own your processes and that they don't own you. Ideas can be implemented much faster if there's a clear understanding of the process. And long, drawn-out change management processes are really a hindrance here. Maybe look at peer review. You want to review your processes and make sure that they're as simple as possible, that they're understood by the organization. And if you see a step in there that isn't needed, go ahead and remove it. From the State of DevOps report, heavyweight change approval processes, such as change approval boards, negatively impact speed and stability. In contrast, having a clearly understood process for changes drives speed and stability, as well as reductions in burnout. Now here, I understand that this looks like a timeline, and it really isn't meant to look like a timeline, but here's some of the things that you oftentimes see in DevOps transformations. You're looking at releasing on demand, and delivery teams are owning their services, soup to nuts. People are really thinking about automation, and it's always continuous improvement. The job is never done. And if you think about it, few companies are ever going to get to that 100% DevOps state, and that's okay because you're looking at that continual improvement, and it's a multi-year journey. So if your company says that a migration or a transformation is going to take 2 years, just go ahead and add a 0 on the end of that, because these things take time. They don't happen overnight. And there's different types of organizations. There's organizations that you can see are thinking about this journey. They're looking at a release cycle. Maybe it's a few times a year. Their processes are really maybe more manual. Some teams are starting to adopt those DevOps methodologies. There's still a lot of scapegoating that can happen when there's failure in these organizations. And then you kind of get to this hybrid state. There's some sort of combination between ITIL and DevOps. Failure is really, kind of leading to justice here, which isn't really where we want to be. But then you get to those DevOps elite type organization, and they're releasing on demand. They have that primary SRE DevOps model. We see that failure is embraced as a learning opportunity, and services are owned by the teams that built it. So let's talk about a few practices that can help get you there. Discipline doesn't cost $1. We want to have practices like configuration management to properly automate. It's important because it enables the ability to scale infrastructure and systems by establishing and maintaining the consistency of a system or product throughout its lifetime. You can buy a lot of tools. However, if you don't implement configuration management across those tools, it needed to be used correctly, it leaves things to chance in your systems. And automation. Automate everything that can be automated. If it can be, automate it. Automate your tests. This is an investment. If you can, build, test, and deploy should all be automated. By orchestrating these processes with a platform, organizations can ensure consistency, which allows them to scale reliably. And then tooling. This is about useful tooling. You want to let the teams who are using the tools decide on the tools. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here. It's going to be dependent on what those teams need, what their expectations are, and how those tools can be implemented. This is one of my favorite charts here. It's the periodic table of DevOps tools. And as you can see, there's tons of tools on here, and it doesn't even list all of them. When you're looking at these, you want to understand how they're being implemented in your organization. Are you using these tools to the best of their ability? Are they potentially conflicting with something else that you already have? Who's using them? How are they being used? How are they being implemented? And again, let people who are using the tools decide on the ones that they want to use. And then we also want to talk about continuous integration. You don't want to spend days or weeks to integrate and make rollbacks hard. Instead, we're really focusing on deploying small chunks of code where you test all along the way, short-lived branches where you're building quality in. And that really allows for the continuous feedback group. Because from like a licensing perspective, it's all the same tools. It's just that doing it wrong and doing it right, it can cost you the same or more when you're doing it wrong. And then also understanding the test-driven deployment methodology. Test-driven deployment is a software development process that relies on the repetition of very short development cycles. Requirements are turned into very specific tests, and then the software is improved to pass the new tests only. This is opposed to software development that allows software to be added and it's not proven to meet requirements. So test often. Automate that testing, automate your regression testing. Testing should be run against every commit to ensure quality and reliability. And then when you're looking at implementing something new in your organization, you can start small. This is, again, that bottoms-up approach. You want to prove out success and lead by example, because change oftentimes comes from other people seeing that you've successfully done something. And with this, it's important to understand that there are metrics that you should measure that will show your success and prove that ROI out to that senior leadership team and to those other teams. And once you've successfully started small, what you want to do is you want to spread that within your organization. You want to help mentor other teams to get to where you are, because the goal is to help everybody else. We want to share the learnings that we've had with the rest of the organization, because at the end of the day, discipline doesn't cost $1. And so I'd like to leave you with this. This is from the State of DevOps report. And many organizations wanting to adopt DevOps look for a set of prescriptive steps or best practices to guide their journey. However, every organization is different, and which practices to adopt depends on the current state of the organization, including the state of its technology, its culture and processes, and its short and long-term goals. And those are the things to keep in mind when you're looking at going on that DevOps journey and understanding where your organization truly is today and taking an honest look at that. And with that, I really want to thank you all for your time, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. If you have any other questions, you can tweet me at Julie Gund. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed Julie's presentation from TechStrong Con. Now it's that time of the day where we go to the news and just headlines from around the neighborhood of media ops sites. Let me give them to you now. And before I do, remember, go to the sites themselves. There's a lot more on there. But here we are. First of all, on DevOps.com. Are we nearing the end of IT service outages? This is from my friend Dave Link over at Science Logic. Dave and I mentioned earlier my time at Interlion, early ASPs. Dave worked with me there, and he went off to start Science Logic shortly thereafter. Man, I hope we are nearing the end of IT service outages. I just don't know if I can wrap my head around it, to tell you the truth. But Dave makes the case. Check it out. Read the article. Then we have Dear Staging, we're done. I've heard this argument before, right? Why waste time with staging? Go right to production. I don't know. We still stage here, and maybe it's just us, but check out the article, and I'd be interested in what you think on that. Then we have a new survey about organizations knowingly deploying vulnerabilities. I know you're saying, who the hell would knowingly deploy vulnerabilities? But, sometimes the choice is made that the vulnerability is not critical enough or not reachable, or there's some other issues involved, and when they do it, and it's not good stuff, I don't think anyone does it, with a full heart, but it happens. And this is a good survey to see how often it really happens, and maybe more than you think. Also, we have over our friends at GitLab, just published a new ROI report. And some people swear by ROI reports. Some people think they're snake oil. But take a look at GitLab's take on it, and you may find it useful. Over on Container Journal, we have real-world lessons from DevOps, Dockerizing applications. interested in your take on that. Wow, sounds like we're getting an alarm here, but hopefully it's not too bad. We also have Palo Alto Networks discloses Kata container floors. Okay, so we've got some vulnerabilities there. And then HPE updates container platform. I'm not really familiar with HPE's container platform, to tell you the truth, so you're going to have to read the article to find out more about that. Over on Security Boulevard, we have Exorcist ransomware and CIS exclusion. 3 tips to safeguard your digital future. And then we have Chrome Web Store fail, 300 more scam browser extensions. And this is something that's kind of plagued the Chrome Web Store for a while now. They've got to do a better QA job of letting extensions in there. And be careful. You might think you're installing one extension, but it really is just like a sound-alike extension, and it's not the extension you think you're getting. Then finally, Centrify applies PAM to machines. So that's our news stories from around the media ops neighborhoods today. Do check out DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. There's a lot more there, and I encourage you to check it out. But for now, we're going to turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, who has an interview with the BugCrowd CEO, and then is going to give us a great preview on this week's webinars on Media Ops.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Ashish Gupta, who is the CEO of a company called BugCrowd. Hey, Ashish, how are you? So glad to see you.
Charlene, very nice to see you as well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure entirely. I'm really fascinated about the topic of bug bounty programs and their increasing, it seems like increasingly they're being used by a number of companies to help just kind of clean up the security issues that companies have. But first, I'd like to learn a little bit more about BugCrowd. So can we start out by you telling me a little bit about your company?
Yeah, that sounds great. Love talking about ourselves. We've been around since 2012. We've essentially built a platform that brings the right researcher, which is a white hat hacker, to come and provide their human creativity and ingenuity to enable our customers to find security vulnerabilities. And then based on the work that we've done on our platform and the triage and validation that we do, we ensure that our customers get a very high signal to noise ratio, which means no false positives, because we'll validate each bug through our triage process and let them know what to fix and what they can start to engage the engineering teams on enabling a fix to happen.
All right. Very, very interesting. So obviously you've been keeping a very close eye on what's been happening in the bug bounty space. So can you kind of paint a picture for me of what's happening out there right now and why we're seeing so much activity these days?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things that are pre-pandemic and just the natural evolution of the digitally connected world, and then the pandemic side of the house. So I'll talk to both of them. From the digitally connected world, everything has software nowadays, right? Even the switches in your homes have software nowadays. And to that end, making sure that they're secure requires us to get feedback from people who see things a different way, right? And we talk about the makers and the breakers. And what we have is a group of amazing breakers who understand what should be seen in software that could create a security vulnerability. Now, when you look at it from a customer's point of view, who technically have a lot of the makers, if you will, the engineers, and that's where the human creativity of our breakers or our white hat hackers comes in, where they provide us those very specific insights on how you can make your software more secure. From a customer point of view, that's really important because people want to get product out to market quickly. They want it to be secure, but oftentimes speed is the enemy of security, right? So we bridge that gap. Second is we have expertise all around the world. We've got hundreds of thousands of researchers that have expertise in mobile, in APIs, in web, in IoT devices, in cars, in satellites, that are able to provide that feedback immediately so that those decisions to fix those bugs can be made instantaneously as well.
All right. All right. Well, I know a couple weeks back, Zoom announced that it was starting a bug bounty program to kind of help lock down its platform. And, obviously the company came under fire for having an open platform and giving rise to the Zoom bombing spate that happened in the early days of work from home. So, given that your company is actually kind of in that business, do you think that Zoom is have they moved quickly enough to kind of address their security concerns? And is bug bounties, is that pretty much the best way that they should go forward with this, or should it just be one element in a greater security strategy?
I think it should be one element. Security is about layers of security coming together. It shouldn't be just any one thing. So bug bounties are very complementary to scanning technologies, which is very complementary as well to firewalls, and the whole security ecosystem comes together to enable people to be that much more secure. Similarly, security is also about how do you secure employees and their email systems as well. Right. So it's a pretty big landscape, and we play a really important part in that landscape because we complement pretty much every security technology and every security process. By bringing the creativity of our white hat hackers, we have the ability to now provide feedback on things that are brand new to even a scanning technology or even a firewall. But we also provide remediation advice on our platform so that you have the ability to fix things, because any one bug can be fixed many, many different ways. Having an idea of how to fix it from the perspective of a hacker just gives the engineering team that much more. From a Zoom perspective, they've been a customer for several years. They've been serious about security. Obviously, just as we're seeing an increase in the number of submissions being made on our platform for our customers, because now people are working from home that much more, Zoom is seeing that much more increased usage because people are working from home as well, right? And to that end, knowing the people at Zoom, and I know Eric Wan really well, he's a gracious, humble human who really does what he says. And the fact that he took this pledge, if you will, 90 days ago, is just a continuation of what he's seen as security being important. We've seen that in our programs. We've found things and they've fixed things that are really important. But just because it's a long-term game, security is, it's important that they have this layered security approach, and we are a pretty important part of that layered security approach for them.
So do you see more organizations adopting bug bounties and related types of, I guess I would call them kind of non-traditional ways of detecting security breaches or security soft spots, if you will? Do you see more organizations kind of adopting those methods to increase their security? I mean, to me, it seems like a natural, but I'm not sure if it's, something that's kind of been kind of a long time coming, or just on, on the low end of the adoption curve yet, or what are you seeing?
We are definitely in the early majority in terms of adoption. So we've crossed that chasm, and it shows because we've got over 30 verticals that are using our products, companies in 30 verticals in 50 plus countries. So it's definitely at that stage where people have recognized that human creativity and finding bugs from a defender's advantage point of view, who know how to attack but have morally chosen to be locksmiths instead of thieves. And to that end, providing that feedback in a timely manner so it can be fixed is that much more important. So when we think about bug bounty, we've extended bug bounty to even do pen testing and get incentives in a way that a gamification model allows people to participate more actively and provide more feedback has even made the pen testing world that much more secure and that much better from our perspective. So bug bounties are here to stay. Companies are using it. We find that even our researchers, just inside the Mind of a Hacker report that we just published, said that 78% of our researchers believe that human creativity enables a much stronger security posture. And these people are managing security postures for different companies and doing bug bounty on the side to enable a much more secure, digitally connected world. So getting that endorsement is pretty huge.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, Ashish, I really do appreciate your talking to me about bug bounty programs and where your company is in the conversation. So thanks again. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your expertise, and I'm sure we'll be talking again sometime soon.
Charlene, thank you so much for having me on, and look forward to talking to you again.
All right, great. Thanks.
Please stay safe.
Yeah, you too. You too. Okay, everybody, please stay safe and stay tuned for the next segment coming up on TechStrong TV. We've got lots more coming up, so stick around.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here with the Monday edition of the webinar previews. First up on our list is a webinar that's happening tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's called The Open Source Licensing World Today and Where It's Heading. This one is sponsored by WhiteSource. Matt Essay, who is the head of open source strategy and marketing at AWS, is going to talk about how some companies that they've been dealing with, and they're very well-known companies, have built successful businesses on the open source licensing model. And he's also going to offer up his take on what he considers to be the future of open source licensing and that model in general. So definitely going to be an interesting webinar to check out if you've got the time. Again, that one is happening Tuesday, August 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. The second webinar I want to let you guys know about is happening on Wednesday. Oh, I'm sorry, no, also Tuesday, August 11th at 1 p.m. This one is called Detecting Subway Overcrowding in Real Time Using a Time Series Database. This one is sponsored by Influx, and it is actually going to be featuring one of Influx's customers, BAI Communications. I think it's Bay Communications. They're the company that actually installed the Wi-Fi service in the New York City subway system and the Toronto subway system. And they're using time series database data to actually alert rail operators when populations on the subway platforms get to be at dangerous levels. So they're using a time series database in a very, very innovative way. And, it's also a public safety way. So it really, really interesting stuff. I'm looking forward to this webinar. I hope you can join me for that one. Again, that one is happening Tuesday, August 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. Now, the third webinar today that I want to tell you about today is the one happening Wednesday, August 12th at 1 p.m. on DevOps.com. This one is called Accelerate Time to Market, AWS and Asana Talk Collaboration. And this one the AWS and Asana folks will talk folks through what organizations need to do to improve alignment between their dev and IT operations teams to be successful, not only in planning and executing, but also in achieving some of the best practices to plan and coordinate across the entire software development lifecycle. This is based on experiences both companies have had, and they've so willingly decided to join forces together and offer this webinar based on their experience. So really expecting good things from this webinar. I think we're going to have some really interesting information imparted from this one. So that is it for the Monday edition of the webinar preview. Please join me tomorrow, Tuesday, for the Tuesday edition, and I'll have some more webinars on tap for you. Until then, please stay safe.
Hey, Charlene, thanks very much. Great interview there with Ashish Gupta of BugCrowd. You know what? Charlene highlighted those webinars. I encourage you, go check them out. There's some great webinars coming up. I also want to, it's not a webinar, it's more of a roundtable, but I want to bring it up to you. August 18th, so about a week from now, we have a live roundtable for DevOps Unbound that I spoke to you about. And this one is on Dev Everything Ops. And we're going to be joined by some great people. We've got Wolfgang Kandek, CTO, co-founder of Tricentis. We've got Mitchell Ashley. We've got Carolyn Wong of Cobalt. And I think we're going to have Anders Wahlgren of CloudBees join us. Plus myself. It's going to be a great roundtable. But it's really about you, right? If you can register, come on in for it. And it's going to be a discussion, an open discussion with the audience. This is not slideware kind of webinar stuff, but we'd love to have you on, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. So check that out, and I think you can get to it. Well, it's all over social media, but up on DevOps.com as well. For now, though, let's now go to the Analyst Corner with Mitchell. It's Mitchell Ashley, not editor-in-chief, founder and Chief Analyst at Accelerated Strategies Group.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. I'm going to do a shameless plug for something that we're involved in. Something just new, just got kicked off, and that's DevOps Unbound. This is a new segment on TechStrong TV. You'll also find past episodes on Digital Anarchist, really bringing together some thought leaders on topics around DevOps. This first episode that we just recorded and was aired last week, Alan was hosting a conversation around testing and the state of test and automation and where this is all going, but also kind of reflecting back where we came from. How did we get here? Now, DevOps Unbound is really a kind of a program that I know I'm looking for, and that's partly why we designed it this way. You know, there's lots of good content out there. There's webinars and sessions and events and lots of good content, training, all kinds of videos and things. A lot of it you'll find on our platforms. I think one of the things I'm looking for is the conversations I miss, interesting conversations I miss from being in the office, kind of the water cooler or going to lunch or going to grabbing a beer, a cocktail after work and sitting down and just chatting about stuff. And suddenly you find yourself into this really kind of engrossing conversation with people maybe you didn't know before, or know real well. Or maybe people you do know, but have kind of gone to a new place that you haven't before. That's partly what this is all about, this DevOps Unbound. It's really to bring us together and create conversations that you can be a part of. You can kind of sneak in and listen into it. It's kind of like being at that pub, at that bar. You slide up that third chair or that fourth chair and kind of sit in, listen in. Maybe you're talking to your friends on the side or whatever, going, okay, this is kind of cool. I enjoy this. I'm learning some stuff. I don't agree with you. I agree with you. And you'll find too in these conversations that there'll be topics and times where we like all see, yeah, clearly that's the problem that needs to be solved. Or I don't know what you're drinking, but I'm drinking this and it says this is the problem. It'll be fun and engaging. So I encourage you to check it out and would love your feedback and ideas about people to have on the program. Now, DevOps Unbound is sponsored by Tricentis, the test automation company, great firm, great company. And we enjoy having on this first segment Grigory Melnick, who is from Tricentis. If you know them, you know Grigory, as well as James Bach, who is from Satisfice.com. So Alan hosts this first session. Actually, I'm a co-host with Alan. As it turned out, the Zoom gremlins, which I had a problem with Zoom earlier this morning, the Zoom gremlins for some reason wouldn't let me into the Zoom meeting, and it was time to record. So they took off in the plane and I stayed at the airport, and which is okay because I got to sit back and listen just like you and check out the conversation, which was great. Gave me a fresh perspective, kind of gave me some new ideas of things to do when I'm part of those recordings as well. And, you know, being part of it is a lot of fun, and the conversation, the excitement is all cool. One of the reasons I really enjoy listening to this kind of content as well as being part of it is if you just really kind of open up as well as participate. I mean, share your opinions or ideas for sure, but open up. You learn a ton. I mean, there's a lot of background in testing, some of its roots and origins, and going back to this IBM that, or was it before that? I had no idea. I'd never even heard of that before. And I've been in software for a long time. So it really was informative. I learned a ton, and definitely want to be part of some more of those conversations, whether I'm listening or participating. So please check it out. Again, I said it would be a shameless plug. It is, but I think it's well worth it. And I hope you do too. Certainly look for your feedback. Send us an email. Send me an email at mitchell@accelst.com. Love to hear your ideas about guests, topics, what you thought. You know, you saw me on one, you thought it said something really stupid, whatever it is. Let us know. We really want to hear your feedback. And it kind of tells us we're hitting the mark and maybe stretching the limits in a few places too, which is always good to do. Thanks for joining me.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hello, welcome to tutorial 10 in the Engineering DevOps tutorial series. I am Mark Hornbeek, DevOps the Gray, CEO and Principal Consultant of Engineering DevOps Consulting. I'm an analyst at the Accelerated Strategies Group, an ambassador and course author for the DevOps Institute, a blogger on DevOps.com, and an author of Engineering DevOps, the book in the picture here. My website is www.engineeringdevops.com. Today's topic is how do you engineer governance for DevOps? So let's get started. The agenda today is what is DevOps governance engineering? Why is governance engineering important for DevOps? How is governance engineering, how is it engineered for DevOps? What is the blueprint? I'll show a blueprint for governance engineering. Talk about some engineering good practices for DevOps governance, and finish with what is needed to engineer governance for DevOps. So there's also a white paper companion to this tutorial, and you can find it on my website at www.engineeringdevops.com/documents. Okay, so what is a DevOps governance engineering? What is it? In general, governance for IT is defined as processes that ensure effective, efficient use of information technology and activities in enabling the organization to achieve its goals. And those goals can be wide and varied depending on the organization. With DevOps, the rate of request of change is continuously increasing if you're doing it well. So the cadence of governance decisions need to respond to this. So this is why, with DevOps, governance does have some changes. It's not quite the same as regular old governance for IT, although there are certainly, a lot of overlap. Uncontrolled proliferation of solutions that can be, the result of DevOps, if you like, without governance. It would lead to greater financial costs, a likely divergence in processes, which can be expensive, and potentially there could be a loss of feedback and process control, which is critical to successful DevOps and successful DevOps governance. DevOps relies on practitioner empowerment. That's part of the general idea of DevOps, to empower engineers. DevOps governance processes rely on central control. So there's a little bit of a conflict, and this is why trying to understand the nuances of DevOps governance is rather important. And we'll talk about it in more detail. So in general, why is engineering governance important for DevOps? Well, a well-engineered DevOps governance capability has a lot of benefits listed here. It provides a dictionary and taxonomy for communicating governance policies across the organization, which improves communication in general. Statutory and regulatory compliance. It needs evidence for audits, and that needs to be produced as part of the DevOps processes. You have to reinforce enterprise culture, ethics, and behaviors in order to assure governance across the enterprise. Governance also sets a direction for the use of technology, because in some ways it limits choices, but also provides change control. When we were talking about DevOps service catalogs in another tutorial, we were explaining how that can be done. Governance can also enforce some standard operating procedures. It can help you with risk management, cost management, provides visibility and process control when done right. It can also help you with performance management of your processes as well as the products. Protects confidentiality, and generally, when you have a strong governance, it facilitates trust with internal and external stakeholders. Through audits, they can see just how strong you're governing your applications and your processes. So these are a lot of reasons. It's interesting. Governance is not talked about all that much in DevOps circles, but it's actually very important for enterprises to really have strong governance. So that's why this tutorial is important. So how is governance engineered for DevOps? And when you talk about governance, you're usually talking about different lines of defense, and it's a little bit different for DevOps compared to other situations. The first line of defense is who owns the risk. Well, with DevOps, you're trying to have individual engineers more responsible. So in many ways, individual engineers really own the risk. The whole organization owns risk, but individual engineers get involved in owning risk. The second line of governance is who sets the policies and monitors the risk. So there are different governance functions. Just having a tutorial or having engineers responsible doesn't make good policies. You need governance capability within the organization to help set governance that's appropriate for that organization. The third line of defense is usually an independent audit committee or an independent assurance. So you have an audit committee working with independent auditors, which is the fourth line, external partners, auditors, and regulators. So governance for DevOps, has to take this into account also and provide the artifacts and capabilities, training, and so on to support these different lines of defense, just as they would without DevOps. Okay, so in general, you want processes to be repeatable and auditable, and verifiable with governance. DevOps journeys involve ongoing improvements and require governance for the organizations, for finance aspects, and for the operational aspects also. So DevOps governance needs to take care of all of these things. If you look at organizational, you define business services and the organizational roles that deliver services, break down silos between development and operations, and then create SLAs to support business services and applications and within the organization, you may have SLIs and the SLOs to support that as well. Service level indicators and service level objectives. On the financial side, you'll need a budget for R&D, typically, business support activities, operational support, network activities, security, both physical and cyber security systems, general IT operations. You need to create procurement methodologies to support financial governance so that the costs don't get out of control. And the operational side, you define processes, procedures, and policies within the operations team and even the development team to govern critical functions. So you align business goals across your entire organization to ensure that continuous integration and continuous development are achieved with governance in mind and the controls and observation capabilities. So this is a engineering blueprint for governance that I put together. It's a big picture diagram that kind of gives you a high-level view, and we'll go into each of the component parts in a few minutes. But in general, DevOps Governance Engineering Blueprint provides for control and practitioner participation at three levels: the teams and how they operate, pipelines, and also overall sites. So essentially, the people side, the process side, and even the application deployment side of things. And all of these things kind of correspond to, I like to relate them to the three ways of DevOps. Team governance can happen in the first way. Pipeline governance generally gets more involved with the second way. And site governance is typically more critical in third way DevOps systems. And I'll talk about that in more detail. Okay, so the first level, team governance. You see the diagram on the left. It's very similar to what I presented in the tutorial on service catalogs. The general idea is that individual developers, if you like, have some level of controls over what they can choose from a service catalog, or they can request additions to a service catalog, but it's not a free-for-all. There are controls in the way changes occur in the choices of application stacks, pipelines, and even infrastructure components. And all of that is overseen by a governance board. And it's done systematically, so it's got audit trails and can be audited for governance purposes. It covers things like incident and issue management. You seek approvals for automated pipelines. You don't just create any old pipeline. You can experiment, yes, but there's an approval process. Quality validation occurs, so that you have metrics from tests, for example, in the build artifacts, and those are managed and maintained and auditable. Security scans occur on artifacts, and again, those things, the data is kept and auditable. User experience is relative to the baseline, so basically ensures the user experience hasn't regressed from the baseline state, if you're looking at that as a governance element. Change management in general, you wait until change management procedures are complete before deployment, so again, there are controls on changing the processes. And overall infrastructure health by executing monitoring and validating the infrastructure against compliance rules after deployment is an example of how you would use that. So these are some things that at the team level are important for DevOps governance, and they each imply certain implementations. They may not all be important for every enterprise and every application in every organization, but essentially it provides you a little checklist to what to think about when you're talking about team governance and DevOps. The second way of DevOps, which is all about continuous feedback and trying to instrument processes so that you get visibility all the way through the different stages of the value stream and pipeline. So in this case, you have some overall metrics and value stream management tools or some other way of aggregating data for the different parts of the pipeline and the infrastructure, and then use that as part of your governance strategy. So it's essential as the enterprise scales. DevOps also scales in complexity typically. To control that complexity and the impact on users and products, you need to support many parallel pipelines and deployment targets, which adds complexity. All of those things need measurement and feedback capabilities, typically embedded in the infrastructures and the pipelines, providing observability and monitoring capability to keep track of it. This will help shorten and amplify the feedback loops because of the data provided. When working in complex systems, real-time feedback provides the earliest opportunity to detect incorrect errors before a catastrophic event develops. In general, continuous security, continuous testing, continuous deployment environments In order for them to scale up, governance must be upgraded to include control gates between pipeline stages and utilize control parameters from feedback sources as a result of those data that are being collected. So these are some ideas and examples of what would be implied when you want to apply governance to a DevOps pipeline. The third way of DevOps has to do with continuous experimentation and improvement. So you're trying to take risks, learn from success and failure, and repeat and ultimately accomplish mastery across the organization. The concepts around site reliability have a lot of application in site level governance. So I refer to that a lot here. In general, you've got DevOps delivering changes. Let's take an example with Microsoft pipelines. So there might be multiple pipelines delivering changes and those need to be overall monitored through SLIs and SLOs and error budgets in a site reliability context before you decide that things are going to go to production. There can be some post-release tests as well, but overall you're trying to keep to an error budget, making sure that you've got reliability. And if not, then you go through remediation and figure out how you're going to get closure on any deviations from the error budget. So basically, the third way DevOps systems are essential for enterprises to accelerate on its ongoing journey of improvement. Pace of innovation changes, controlling reliability, typically through SRE system practices, whether you call it SRE or not. It's a similar concept. Governance practices for the third way systems tend to build on governance for the first and second way. So anything I said before still applies. The SREs generally assure reliability for service level agreements in production by continuously monitoring service level indicators during the pipeline activities, ensuring candidate releases that do not meet service level objectives aren't released to production, or if they are, then error budgets are reined in, and only changes that are going to support improving reliability will be allowed at that point. So changes that don't meet SLOs are rolled back for remediation if necessary. Okay, so those are sort of three ways of DevOps governance in terms of how DevOps can be accomplished. Engineering practices for DevOps governance include practices for the people, as well as the process and the technology, and I'll cover a little bit about all of those. So for people, you generally have a governance policy board, which is a cross-functional representation of people that really care about governance. It's usually an executive team, at least represented, legal, product owners, security represented, even HR, architects, developers, operations, QA, infrastructure, finance, product management, vendor management, project management. So basically all the different roles and functions are represented depending on what governance elements are important for your organization. And they create and update policies regularly, making sure that the development teams that are doing DevOps are aware of them and put in place tracking mechanisms to keep track of what needs to be covered and controls. The roles of different users of the pipelines include responsibilities to respond to gate criteria exceptions, so that even the response to problems in the pipeline are part of the governance policy when it comes to people. Okay, when it comes to process, generally speaking, governance policies are defined for each domain, let's say a geographic region. They may be a little different. What's legally important in one country may be different than another, but in general, you want to take that into consideration when producing governance policies. Resource consumption should be shown in dashboards and data analytics to help with optimization scenarios. Projects should adhere to defined reference architectures using security blueprints, including a catalog. So the service catalog idea comes up again here as a way to help do this. Code changes are monitored with peer reviews, code governance, code quality governance, and security. Unauthorized changes should trigger governance reviews. So if there are exceptions to governance detected by the pipeline itself, it should trigger a governance review. Role-based access should exist for different environments, certainly for production environments. So only the people that are authorized can access it at any point in time. The gate criteria for each pipeline stage, including thresholds for control parameters such as incidents and issues, approvals outside of pipelines. I would say error budget, exceptions, quality validation, security, user experience, change management, and general infrastructure health. All of these things, should have metrics. If where they are important for governance for your particular organization. And again, they may not all be important for every organization. Those are examples. Okay, technology-wise, the governance focus usually focuses at a higher level than just individual components. You're trying to look at a whole product or a whole service. Developers will leverage automation, such as building on commits, implementing static code analysis on every builds, scanning open source vulnerabilities, performing static security scanning, running automated tests. These are just examples of how you can use automation to support governance and provide the data and artifacts and documentation to support audits. A clean room model is usually adopted where all the product pipelines, the applications as well, the testing and infrastructure code, they're all identified and registered under source control or a image repository somewhere so that you've got version management on those things. Tools for collecting information should be needed, that are needed for gate criteria decisions should be available within the pipelines as part of your standard model. Standard architecture is available from your service catalogs. Tool processes, gate criteria data that's collected, tools should process gate criteria data that is collected, and that should be integrated into the pipeline so that this is done in an automated fashion. So those are some of the technology things to consider with DevOps governance. Okay, so what is needed to engineer governance? There's different phases of implementation. First of all, you define gate criteria for each pipeline stage, including thresholds for control parameters, such as incident and issues, approvals outside of automated pipelines, quality, validation, security, user experience measures, change management, and infrastructure health. Identifying tools for collecting information for gate decisions, identify tools to process the gate criteria data that's collected, and finally, production reliability targets should be set up in an SRE environment. What are the error budgets associated with an SLO? And these should be determined for each application service. SREs and dev teams should determine the targets together. This forms a contract between development and operations, which release decisions are governed. Phase 2, once you've got all that in place, then you implement the governance, integrate the gate criteria into the pipeline, implement workflows for the pipelines to utilize the gate information as part of the promotional changes from gate stage to stage, and update roles of the users of the pipelines to include responsibilities and respond to gate criteria exceptions. Finally, phase 3, site reliability engineering practices provide the means, tools, automation, workflow, mindset, if you like, to monitor site service level indicators and act when the service level objectives are not met. Service level objectives should be reviewed periodically to make sure they make sense, reviewed with customers typically, and as situations tend to change over time during continuous improvement cycles, and also as an application or service evolves and becomes more mature. Try to keep ahead of that where you can, and have a forecast of what's going to happen so that you build SLOs accordingly. SLI data collection and service tools should be integrated into the pipeline as well. So as much as possible, automate, automate, automate. All right, so this is the slide you've been waiting for, the last slide. Just how do you engineer governance for DevOps? In summary, DevOps governance is different than traditional IT governance. Certainly there's overlap, but it's different. DevOps well-engineered governance implements team governance, pipeline governance, and site governance. So all of those things need to be considered. DevOps practices to implement governance include a taxonomy for communicating governance policies, statutory and regulatory compliance to provide evidence for audits, reinforce enterprise culture, ethics, behaviors, set direction for the use of technology, enforce standard operating procedures, invoke risk management concepts, cost management concepts, get visibility and control over the whole DevOps activity, performance measurement, protect confidentiality, and facilitate trust with stakeholders. So all of those things need to be considered. Again, for any particular application or service, some of these things may be important, more important than others, but in general for DevOps, all of those things ought to be considered. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial. And if you want to learn more, you're welcome to contact me at mhornbeek@engineeringdevops.com, or you can get a copy of the white paper at engineeringdevops.com documents, or a copy of my book, which covers this also in my book.to/DevOps engineering DevOps. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial of the engineering DevOps series of tutorials. Thank you.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Thanks, Mitchell. Great stuff today. Well, folks, that's going to take a wrap on Monday, August 10th. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. We'll be back tomorrow with another fresh show full of great new content for you. And until then, as always, I hope you stay safe, stay well, stay strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out. We'll see you tomorrow.